Okay, good afternoon. It's about 4:15 p.m. and we are ready to start the work session. We have a couple of items on the agenda today. The budget discussion for fiscal year 22-23. We went through an exhaustive in March and beginning of April. I think we had exhaustive work sessions and discussions on the preliminary budget analysis. Last week, this came as a non-action item, and next week, the board will formally approve the budget as an action item out there. But in between, we have a work session. So anything related to budget and what Glenn presented last week, and we start from there. Dr. Gleditch, I'll turn it over to you. Is there anything extra that you need to add? Or
No, I do want Glenn and Laura to give you an update.
Okay.
Just in case, I did send an email out yesterday with an update regarding the sale of the Whittier building. But also just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I did not receive any questions from board members, and I remember we gave them Monday the holiday break, but I still haven't received any. So we thought we would guide our responses to any questions that board members might have as well. But if we could give the two of them just an opportunity to give you a brief update and make sure that we're all connected and we're on the same page. Everything did go through on consent as directed by the board. Maricela didn't have the updated sheet when she did the board agenda last week when she was gone. And so we worked with her and everything is moving forward, student fees and all of the three different items. And so the only one on action will be the actual budget. So Glenn, with that said, can you and Laura give us a little update?
Sure, just first of all, I want to thank Laura and our team again for all the hard work they've done. And yes,
Absolutely.
and just to embarrass Laura, she's going to be on North America's highest peak in a week. So she's climbing Mount Denali. It's pretty cool. So we had missed the sale of the Whittier, which just closed. And the board at that time had designated those funds to go to CTE projects. So we're revising the appropriation for the capital reserve to appropriate the revenue, which will really be a carryover to next year because we've already received the revenue, and B, appropriate the expenditure. At some point, we'll need Dwayne to give us more specific details on what those projects are. They do have to be capital projects by state statute. The proceeds of any real estate have to go into the capital reserve fund, so it has to meet our capital reserve thresholds for capital improvements. So that's the major change in the budget. The version you have on your work session has been changed for that. The other thing is we made a few minor FTE changes. They are not ads, they're not new people. It's just cleanup that we're resolving some discrepancies that we weren't sure working with HR. If you'd like to talk to me offline, I can share with you what those couple of ones were. But it's just cleaning up stuff that we already knew was in process and making sure the right pages are in the budget. So those are the only two changes to the proposed budget. As you know, we had to have the proposed budget out by June 1st. The board has to adopt the budget by no later than June 30th, which of course you'll do hopefully next week. And as you know, we've spent a lot of time going through the details of the budget, and I really feel like the board is growing and learning, and we appreciate that. And we want you to understand it's a lot of resources. You know, what's the total appropriation? $700 million. So yeah, it's not insignificant. So we want to make sure the board understands where all that money is going. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Could you remind us the sale price of Whittier after closing costs and all that?
3.2.
And then follow-up question, 3.2 million. And then follow-up question to that is, Terry, did you take that into account with the CTE renovations on slide 5?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 13.2 million on slide 5 of 16 for the bond topic, plus the additional 3.2 for the Whittier. Okay.
Is that out? Just to verify, is that correct, Terry? Is it 13.2 plus 3.2 or 13.2 minus 3.2?
3.2 plus 13.2 plus the 3.2.
Plus the 3.2.
Okay. So we'll have additional money to what's listed here.
Major investment.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we get on to that bond discussion
Yeah.
with Terry, any questions itself on the budget portion of it to Glenn or Laura? Go ahead.
So I had two questions. One question was, I had received some feedback through site visits and other things I can't really recall where it came from on the way that we use our print shop, our printing piece with it, you know, maybe not having as competitive pricing as the open market. I'm not anywhere attacking, just asking questions tonight.
Sure,
I'm not gonna poke anything crazy. I'm wondering is, you know, with it being a $2 million budget a year for our printing program, and I see some costs for upgrading printers and things like that, have we discussed the feasibility of moving that to outsourcing so that we don't have that on our books every year? Or is it something that every site uses really dramatically and we've got a really nice streamlined system to all of our schools that we just go, don't touch it? I just wanted to ask because of some comments I heard from site visits.
Sure. So I'm surprised to hear that. Actually, we hear mostly rave reviews. We actually get criticism from the private market that we're usually about 50% of, we don't like to use the K word, that other company out there, but we're about 50% of their costs. It's also extremely streamlined. So when a school puts in a print order, they don't know where it's going to get printed. It could be printed at their school. It could be printed at one of the cluster schools, which is usually the high school, not always, or it could be printed downtown, and just depending on where we have availability and capability. So generally, we receive rave reviews on the whole print, plus they manage the whole copier fleet, which is a giant headache. Nobody wants that job.
I remember those days.
Yeah, nobody wants that job, and if anybody wants it, we're glad to give that away.
I was a copier tech for 11 years.
Yeah, so you know. But I would also just finally say, schools aren't required to use us, the print shop. So if they can get a better deal, they're allowed to go to them.
Maybe that was it. I feel like it was something about a banner or something where the banner could have been cheaper somewhere else. And so that's good to know that they don't have to.
Usually, we're really competitive on the banners, but, because we have a 4-color press with the vinyl banners, but they're allowed to go somewhere else. If they want to do that, that's okay.
I love it. That's what I wanted to ask. Thank you very much.
I think last time we were here, we were talking, I remember when I was here, we were talking about letting them compete and everybody got at it.
Yeah, the board, that's right. The board actually got nervous about us competing with the private sector business because we don't pay income taxes. So we do restrict our print shop activity to the district, which is probably, I don't know if Laura knows, 80 or 90% of our business, other governmental units and nonprofits. And if it's a nonprofit, they have to show us their nonprofit proof in order for us to do their work. And we won't do any private sector work.
Okay, great. And then my second question was on page 21 of 149 of the PDF. So first section there, instructional staff, the last line item, equity and inclusion. If you look at the 21-22 budget and then the 22-23 proposed budget, I know in April in our talks about modifications, we were letting that grant sunset and not carrying that money into the general fund, but it's still earmarked here. Can you,
I'm sorry.
page 21 of 149, could you explain why that line item is still in there for that?
You got that, Glenn?
Yeah,
What he-
yep,
is
I
that-
see it, exactly. And I'm gonna ask Laura to correct me if I'm wrong. So that's actually one of the FTE corrections that we made.
On that page, there's no FTE in there.
There's no FTE?
That is the supplies budget that I was told to leave because we were still gonna be doing equity throughout
Embedded
the
into the
supplies.
schools, so
But
there,
that does not, are you looking at 65,000?
no, it's
No.
283.
283,000 under instructional staff. So the staffing piece there, which I think we were, not going to carry into the general fund.
I don't know.
We may have to look into that. We know one of the FTE changes is we were holding a placeholder on the 2 general funded employees to make sure that wherever they landed, they would have an FTE for a job.
Okay.
But Laura and I will have to look into the detail of why that's still shown as 283. We think it should be smaller.
Yeah, I don't know. I go with Sandra's numbers for the salaries. I'll have to look.
We'll check on that.
Thank you. That's why I brought it up, because I think we had discussed
Yep.
mid-year budget modification.
Maybe you
and
can
now-
just send an email to the board
Yep.
on that.
Yep, we'll do that.
Okay. Any other questions on the budget topic? Okay, I do have one follow-up question, and this is regarding the, what the money the board set aside for that after-school enrichment. Ms. Callback, you had mentioned at that point in time that you were going to meet with the principals. And I just wanted to get an update from you. How did that meeting go? Has this program been advertised in those school communities? What's the plan? Maybe you can share it with
Sure.
us.
So I met on Monday the 16th with the, all of the principals who will be receiving the program, as well as with Carol Fry at Monroe and Lynn Bosky at Twain, because they've had the programming for a couple of years and have learned a lot of the ins and outs about what works, what doesn't, how our processes can best support all of those sorts of pieces. So we worked through an agenda of a whole lot of logistics in about an hour and a half. You may have seen, I think the morning after you all approved the funding, Deborah actually put it on the D11 website. We have a site that is specific to these after-school enrichment programs, which will be updated as schools develop their plans. Principals have been asked to turn in their plans both to me and to their executive director before they leave for the summer, so that we can see what they've accomplished, where they might need some support, and what we might be able to do to help them over the summer. And they are already starting to sign up students. So yes, it is being advertised and already being accepted and appreciated by the community. So thank you for
Okay.
that.
And the ESP staff that was set aside, that one ESP staff, where are we in the process about hiring them?
Principals are in the process of hiring them now. Some of those are still posted, some of those are in the interview process. But principals are actually working toward getting that hire complete before they leave for the summer.
So by the time they come back in late July, everything should be set and ready to go for this program to roll out in August, where we put out the communication at that time, so, okay.
Yes, sir?
And you have a plan the main idea was to recruit new students, also keep the same students. You have a plan in place after talking how you can go about doing it.
Yes, we talked about reserving a particular number of seats at any given school for incoming kindergartners, especially because that's where we tend to get new families for elementary. Schools will also be asked to track their attendance in the program, which students are returning to their school, which families are new to their school, so that we have some great data points to share with you and to plan from at the semester and then again at the end of the year, and you'll be able to see the effectiveness.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate all the hard work that you guys have put into it. Dr.
Just
David.
wanted to add that another part of the conversation that we had back when it was approved by the board was we won't necessarily wait until August to send out another promotion. We'll wanna do that sometime in the middle of July and in the end of July, because in the middle of July, families are beginning to make their plans for the next school year, so they need to know that it's available at those school sites at that time. So you can expect to see something mid-July and August when the school year actually starts. We just don't wanna rely on August only.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, and I did remember one other piece as well. We're combining the program, as you know, for Midland and West. Working with the principal, we've decided to house that at Midland, and transportation is working with us. West students who access the program will be bused to Midland in the afternoon at the end of the school day, so that they have access to that program too.
Okay. Thank you, that's all, go ahead.
Are you tracking also where families are coming from? I know you said that they're in track, the schools will track some information, but I was just curious if we'll know that, they're already a D11 family, or actually now they're coming back to us, they weren't the year before, that kind of thing.
We'll work in partnership with my phone a friend in enrollment to make sure that we have that data for you.
Okay, yeah, it'd be good for the board to get an update sometime in the fall.
Sure.
What the capacity is, how it has been received by the community, where we are getting the students from. So thank you.
Sure.
Again, appreciate all the hard work you and the principals in those schools have been doing. It is a priority, as you know, to increase enrollment, and that was why we invested the money. We want to make sure that money is being used to attract new students, so.
How are we advertising
Um,
other than online?
Mostly that's through our website right now. Deborah, are we utilizing it? I know you released a press release as well. I did an interview with at least one news station, maybe two, I'm trying to remember.
So our initial efforts were public relations. If we have the funds and are able to do it, we can produce some advertising, but I don't think that we want to go that direction right now because I think the demand is gonna be
I was just thinking, I feel like I've seen a lot of our schools have for kindergarten, like enroll your kindergartner now type of signs at the buildings, so I didn't know if the schools that have this after school program would also have a sign next to it that says,
Yeah,
free, so that as people are driving.
The banners.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll
I'll
see
check
the
on that.
banners, but.
That banner would cost maybe $50, I think, or something like that.
Well, we have those printed in our print shop.
Right,
I hear they're,
exactly.
I hear they're very,
Maybe
well,
we
they
get
are.
get a reduced rate.
Yes, we will.
Or go somewhere else where they're cheaper.
That
You have a
too.
choice. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. Yeah, maybe we can advertise it on the school website, individual school website, whatever we can to get the word out.
I just know that when I was doing my school tours, one of the schools shared how their school, the community in that area isn't aware that they should be enrolling their children now, and that they don't really know ahead of time how many they're actually gonna get until August, and that's when people realize I need to sign my kids up, and so it just kind of got me thinking about that, like, how do we get the word out to families so that we know our enrollment, what it'll look like sooner? In that specific community, what is it that maybe we need to be doing differently? And that's where I was going with that sign idea.
Thank you.
Okay, the other question I had is, and this falls under the ESSER money, summer bridges starting, when is it starting?
June 6th.
June 6th. Any update on how that looks like, what type of enrollment we have with the students, how is it being received by our community, anything on that? And are the one other thing we mentioned, several board members mentioned, is to monitor our kids at the beginning and the end, and all that is in place. Maybe you
Yes.
can-
As of last Thursday, we had 6,500 students enrolled for Summer Bridge, and we're still enrolling. So that number has probably gone up since Thursday.
6,500.
Yes.
How does that compare to last year, do you know?
Last year, we served 5,581 students, so it is more.
Okay,
What's capacity?
That's a good question. I don't have that number in front of me, but we'll find out.
That's okay. I was just curious, if we're at 6,500, should we be trying to recruit more? I know, cause we target most needed, right?
Yes.
Those students, but
Yes.
then if we could bring in more,
We fill
and
those
maybe it
seats.
doesn't make sense, maybe we wanna keep smaller class size, but yeah, if there's schools that we could reach more kids.
Yes, there's a balance of the two. And if we have a school who has more enrollment than we planned for, we have a list of teachers who were not picked up to be summer bridge teachers for whatever reason, who are available to substitute. But we could also pull from that list to say, we need another first grade teacher at Keller, just
Yeah.
for example.
Right,
So I don't know that there's truly a capacity
okay.
limit, if you will.
Well, that was my question. No, there is no, I mean, we can keep going as many as we need to.
Yeah, I would say we get as many kids in as we can then, if we're paying the staff and they're there. If we add a few more kids to a class and it's not tipping us for that class size, then we're kind of down to the wire now. June 6th is in 5 days, or I don't know what's today.
And class size is important in summer bridge too. It will
Yeah.
be smaller than it
Yeah.
would be during a normal school year. On the second day of summer
Can I add
bridge.
to that?
Yes,
Class
please.
size also during summer bridges is critical.
Yes.
Maybe no more, because it's serving those in most need.
Yes,
So the smaller the class size, not that they have to be small,
right,
but the greater attention we could give to the individual needs, because when you look at the standards that we'll be doing with a pre and a post test at the beginning of the session, at the end of the session, one of the things that'll be included in your monitoring tool that we're working on once you adopt your board priorities this week is we are looking at students who attended at least 17 of the, am I right?
17
of the 20 days will be those that we will assess the pre and post with to see what type of progress our kids made. And so we need to make sure that if you think about a class and the variety of needs and skills levels that are in that class, individual teachers are going to have to really individualize out a lot of work to help students reach some of those standards, because some kids might be tested on a standard that they're coming in well below that standard, so there's gonna be a lot of work to get them there.
Yeah.
So that class size is important,
Yeah,
I
and I
think.
don't wanna say that we build past the class size.
Oh, I know.
I definitely want us to focus on the kids that need it, but if we're finding there is room for more without taking away from the kids that need it, then.
I don't think we'll have to turn anyone away.
Follow-up to that, what are we doing to incentivize attendance? I know when I was part of summer school, we did a smaller field trip, like at day 15. We did 30 days, smaller field trip at day 15, and then we had like a bigger, like we took the kids to the zoo if they had, perfect attendance on the last day. Are we doing anything like that to encourage that attendance that we need?
Actually, we told them that the board members were coming in with ice cream sandwiches on the 5th of the 10th day.
What day is that? I'm writing it down, I'll be there.
I bring that up only because you need to know, and I know I didn't publicly tell you this at a board meeting, how much that was appreciated. Recognition for 5Es and just how much that was appreciated, and then the board members that went at various schools and scooped and things, that's why I jokingly said it, because I've been forgetting to say something. But how are we going to?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So every school built into their summer bridge budget has, I believe it's $5 a child, but that is specific to summer bridge incentives. And so every school builds their own plan, but generally there's an incentive at the end of every week,
Pizza
and they build as the
party,
summer goes on. Yep. Pizza party, ice cream, field trip, fun in the park, all sorts of different things. Some schools partnered with different groups like Catamount to come in and do special activities, because we know attendance is not truly required in summer bridge, and so it is harder to incentivize students and families to stay. It's one of the reasons we don't give the pre-assessment on day one, because we want students to come back after day one, and if we test them day one, that might not happen. But yes, there is an incentive budget that every school builds out.
Okay. One other question I had, not on summer bridge, but the ESSER 3 funding allocation, Dr. Gleditch, you had mentioned that you were getting together with your executive cabinet to look at it item by item. And that happened, I think, earlier this month?
Yes, it did, and
Earlier in May.
It's concluded, and we're prepared to bring it to the DAC budget subcommittee or the DAC subcommittee for ESSER when they return.
Okay.
And we have everything addressed, and they all came forward with the 4 lenses: academic achievement, enrollment, safety, security, social emotional needs. And we'll see where the DAC budget subcommittee goes with their recommendations.
Okay. Were there any changes that were made after you guys discussed as an executive cabinet in
No,
the allocation of ESSER 3 funds?
no, the packet went, well, there were things deleted. We did free up some money in some areas. Glenn, 2, 3?
1.3.
1.3, oh, that's where the 2 and 3 comes, okay, 1.3 million that we can come back and look at a later date once we see where everything falls.
Okay, and there was one line item there which addressed 51 FTE hires to address learning loss, and this will be for the next 2 years. Have those hires been made, or where are we in the process of those hires?
Yes, sir, we had Ms. Middleton give us a breakdown, and they all have been generated FTEs. Many of those are ESPs, they're not necessarily teachers. They have been posted, many of them have been filled, many of them have been working in our schools this year as well. Many serve as instructional tutors in all of our classrooms going throughout all grade levels, and so the answer to your question is yes. I think there might have been at the time, we were looking at that 6 or 7 that were vacant at that point in time.
Okay, so just want to make sure that that money is being spent and we are hiring, so we are using all the ESSER money that we received. Okay.
That's a really good question. If I could add to that, especially since we're on the topic of budget, one of the things I think we worry about the most, or let's say Nick and Glenn worry about, but I'm sure others around me worry about it too, because we're worried, is the spend down. And we need to make sure that we have an individual that's accountable for each one of those areas with monitoring beyond the people in grants, that we're spending the money the way we said we were going to spend it, and more importantly, that we are spending it and the purchase orders are out there. So that is definitely something that's on our plate to deal with next year, to make sure that it's there.
Okay. Any other board questions on the ESSER money or anything right now?
I know, we had talked about building a task force to go over that general fund,
Fund balance.
fund balance. Can you give us an update on that?
Absolutely, great question. So Dr. Gleditch asked me to wait until we were right in the middle of testing and all the year-end activities. I just recently sent out an email to the committee asking them, giving them a heads up, letting them know who's on the committee. And by the way, I think you expressed interest in attending.
Yeah.
So I had-
right, just a fly on the wall or?
I have you on my list.
Okay.
And there was another board member too, I can't remember who, but
Sandra.
was it Sandra? We will start scheduling the meetings here soon. Because it's summer, probably July is gonna be tough, but I let them know what the process is. Right now, all the division heads and people under them are preparing their forms. And those are they were due to Dr. Gletch, I think, today.
Those that report to me had to have them in today.
Yeah.
You were a little more lenient. You
They're-
gave them to June 15th.
Yes. So they come to me by no later than June 15th, assuming they have everybody's signatures on them, because the division head has to sign off. Then we'll compile those and put them into a packet format, kind of like what we do with budget requests. And then we'll go to the committee and start prioritizing and give them the parameters and start evaluating them and everything. And then it will come back to the board for approval and then appropriation at some point. So that Laura's got the money appropriated, we just need to put it in the right accounts.
Is there a timeline that you have in mind that the board will be seeing it?
That's a great question. I kind of hope that, I was thinking September. I'd like to get the resources started as soon as possible with our urgent mission. So I'm hoping then, but of course, we're gonna have a new superintendent that might want some input into that because it is a great opportunity. So it should be sometime this fall, I think.
Okay. Great, thank you.
By the way, I do think, just so the board knows, we have, several ESP and teachers on that committee, and if we bring them in over the summer, of course, we'll have to pay for that, but I don't view that as a big expense, and I don't think it'll be very many meetings.
And Glenn, I think you also said, and correct me or can you elaborate, we really can't do much until the money's appropriated.
Right.
And so you still spend a lot of June and July and August to scrub and make sure you have the actual fund balance amount. And then once it's appropriated, then we can really take action. So we really don't want to go out and approve stuff too early and people wait for the money to be available to do it. So we're trying to connect all of that activity together. Right?
Can I just tweak that?
Yeah,
a little
I
bit?
want you to. 'Cause
So
I'm
Laura has
rusty.
appropriated all the fund balance, but of course, it's just a projection, it's June 1st. We still got a whole month to go in the fiscal year.
That's what I meant.
But what she doesn't have is appropriated by line item, because we don't know what the requests will be. So what I'm thinking, and I haven't even talked to Laura about this, but what I'm thinking is, once we get the prioritized list, that is the recommendation, of course, the superintendent will have to approve that, then we'll take it to the board for approval to say, okay, this is how we're gonna spend it. That way Laura can put the money into the right accounts, so it can actually get spent. Does that work for you?
Correct, I budgeted it as a contingency balance, right now you'll see 75 million, that was contingency.
75 million is what we're.
That's what I think this budget includes, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And remember, they can request for 3 years.
You good?
I'm good. I didn't have we spent so much time on this before,
Right.
I don't have any detailed questions. Good job, everybody.
Glenn, last week when you made that presentation, there was a slide on capital reserve fund.
Mhm.
And you identify major capital projects planned for fiscal year 23. And you have a list of projects. Is this the money, that $20 million that you're talking about, set aside from the MLO
And the general fund.
and the general fund? That's what this money is being spent?
Correct. Correct.
It doesn't add up to $20 million when I look at it.
There's lots of carryover because summer construction season crosses right over our fiscal year end.
Okay.
So every year we have money that we're carrying over that hasn't been fully spent. And the new money that's coming in. And so it's just because our fiscal year end is right smack in the middle of construction season.
Okay,
There's also a lot of smaller projects. I mean, the list of projects, if you look at the Fund 43 budget, is extensive. We just highlighted some of the
some
major
of the
ones.
major ones.
Yeah, in the proposed budget book, there is a very good detailed list.
So there is one item here which talks about the district-wide safe drinking water, and about 450,000 is set aside for that. Is that based on that state bill that was passed?
Terry,
sir.
yeah, will you please?
What that one is that is the assessment that we've been working on for the last 2 years.
Okay.
So that's why we know what the impacts of that House bill that you just mentioned.
So this is not putting in filters or anything like that. This is just the assessment.
This was sampling, and we did do some corrective actions as well under it, but they've been minor. What we found is that some of our problems was the fixture themselves. Others was the pipe inside of the wall a little ways. Some of them were things like the backflow prevention device for the building, and it's because of the age of our facilities. Even though lead was banned in a lot of instances, it was used, I think, as a component of solder into the 70s and maybe even into the 80s. And so it's just leaching out and getting into the pipes. We've only found one school to date that we cannot mitigate by the fixtures and devices in the system, and that's Chipeta. And we've got a much more extensive plan, devised more of a Wasson-like repiping.
Okay.
And are those fixes ongoing, or is it once you do it, we're good to go?
Once we do the corrective repair, then we go back and sample again to verify that we got it. But the protocol was pretty rigid. So we'd take a first grab sample, we'd flush it, and based on the series of sampling it told us where the problem was.
Okay. And then we'll fix it and be good.
That is our plan. One and done.
Yeah.
Filtering is the last resort as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that I understand, this $450,000 was just for the testing and the assessment of the conditions out there.
Part of the testing, I think project started 2 years ago
Okay,
for testing. It's just taken us this long, and we've got about 6 weeks left of testing, and we'll have a full comprehensive report in August or September.
so what I'm trying to figure out is what are we spending the
And
$450,000?
we have spent, Johnford, and we have spent quite a large sum of money in corrective actions, replacing fixtures, going back 3 feet in pipe in order to where we tested hot per se, and went back to those corrective measures. And this is what's projected based on the prior 30 schools that we did, what we project to do to finish out the testing and corrective measures that don't include the major rework piping jobs.
Sounds good, perfect. Any other questions on the budget before we move on to the next item? So the board is comfortable, other than the question you had, which Glenn will get back to you and the board, comfortable with approving this as an action item next week? Okay, we are good to go. Next item is the discussion on the bond. And again, I'll turn it over to Dr. Glidich, and you can set it up and
Sure. I'm assuming that we've all had an opportunity to look at the bond preview that Glenn and Terry put up on the website prior to our meeting today. But I just wanted Glenn and Terry to just give you a brief overview of what was in that PowerPoint before we actually initiate our discussion. And we really feel that the discussion needs to be driven by you to us in regards to the bond. We have prepared, and I have a chart that I can distribute when we get to that point in the conversation. We have an idea or two regarding if the board is wanting a discussion on tying an academic achievement type criteria to the bond. David has worked with Cabinet and worked with his staff, and we have some ideas or an idea there that we could share with you as well. I think initially, I think what we need to have the board do is just any questions with the initial PowerPoint that was given. And then I've asked Glenn to sort of walk through the pros and cons, possibly of going out for a bond this year at this point in time, so that we could see what we would be up against and what could potentially hurt us down the road. So what are those pros and cons? And just sort of be thinking about those as we continue the discussion. And then lay out potentially a timeline if the board were to choose to go out. We need to have an election question developed sometime in August as an action, non-action item. And things that we would probably want to think about as we're having this discussion today is where would we, how would we potentially raise funds for a campaign moving forward? Have we given that any type of consideration and thought? And how we would actually have a campaign run. Would we want to look at an outside source moving forward? So I think there's a lot of things we want to think about as we're having the discussion today. And then we're hoping to get some type of direction to sort of define our summer work if need be. So Glenn, if you could sort of kick us off a little bit with a little bit of a pros and cons.
Al wanted it.
PowerPoint or PDF?
It was in the, I'm sorry, it's a PDF.
Yeah, it's a PDF.
Well, it's a PDF.
It looks like a PowerPoint that's
There
been
was-
turned into a PDF.
There was also a flipped presentation that there was a.
And the flip
The audio.
presentation on top.
Like a video presentation.
Yeah, video.
So I'd like to actually finish with Terry and John in terms of the projects. We gave Terry and John a scope of looking for the most urgent capital needs, but also representing a geographical representation across the district. But one of the questions that came up is why this project, why not that project? And you know, as we were thinking about that, really, we would love some help. Typically, we've had an oversight committee or a subcommittee help us pick the projects that we would go forward. So if the board really wants to do that, I think Terry and I would really appreciate that. We don't want all that responsibility on us that we pick those projects when maybe there's an instructional project that would be a better investment of district resources. But with that
Can I
said,
interrupt, Glenn?
sure.
I think Glenn just made a point. What we prepared for you today was just our best thinking without getting a lot of input because the board really has not given us any direction. So that we didn't reach out to other people who were closing out the school year with kids. They came forward with what they could see. So if the board did choose, we do need a subcommittee that's going to help define that. And I appreciate you saying that, Glenn, because we just did something to just have point of conversation today.
Right, thank you.
Good point, Glenn, thank you.
So let's step backwards and talk about why now, what are the options, what are the logistics of this? And actually, thanks to Treasurer Nelson, she asked me some really good questions and it got me to thinking that, you know, I bet a lot of board members don't know some of this history. So I put together a document, but unfortunately, I couldn't get that done until this morning, so a lot of you probably haven't had a chance to read it. But what spawned the conversation initially, we went for a bond issue last year. We were at 6.5 mils as our bond levy. We went for a bond issue for $350 million, which is what 6.5 mils would have afforded. And we pitched that as a no tax increase bond. You're legally allowed to say in the election question, without raising taxes, shall the district blah, blah, blah. Remember that the language of an election question is governed by Tabor, and it's in the Colorado Constitution. It's very specific. You either have to start your election question with shall taxes be increased or without raising taxes. That is in the Constitution. You don't have a choice on that. So that's why the board went down that path. I won't go back down there, you know, for whatever reasons it failed. So we had to lower the district's bond levy from 6.5 to 2.1. That was a great tax savings for our taxpayers. 4 mils works out to be about $100 for a $350,000 home, which probably is not average anymore, but at the time that was the number we were using. And so that was no small deal. Unfortunately, probably most taxpayers didn't even see it because their home value jumped up so much, right? So they never saw that their mill levy from D11 was actually going down. And so they got a tax decrease as a result of D11, the tax rate. So now we're at 2.1 mils. The Board of Education at the time said for the 2017 mill levy override, we want to pay off all of our bonded indebtedness. We're going to use the difference between the full amount of the 2017 mill levy override and a 6-year phase-in, so each year it would get less and less, and use those funds in combination with our bond redemption funds to pay off the bonds. And as I've told the board a couple times, we are on track to do that. We're actually going to bring a resolution to the board this fall, and the board has to approve us to go forward. And they call it in the bond business, call the bonds, but it's like a prepayment. It's the only time we can call them, December 1, 22. If we miss that window, then we can't, then we're kind of stuck till they finish. We have to keep paying them as they go. But that was part of our commitment to the community when we passed the 2017 mill levy, right? So we presume that's still the intent of the board to do that, and we will have enough money between the mill levy override and the bond redemption to completely pay off those bonds. At that point in time, for 23, calendar year 23, we would lower the district's bond levy from 2.1 mils to 0, because we won't need a bond redemption fund anymore, and off we go. So unfortunately, the pandemic has dramatically increased capital construction costs. Prior to the pandemic, we were actually making progress, chipping away. And the plan was always that the 2017 mill levy override would provide enough resources to maintain this annual investment in capital renewal, and it maxes out this coming year at $18 million. Unfortunately, $18 million today sounds like a lot less than it did 2 years ago. And so now suddenly it looks woefully deficient. And you add that we just increased the whole capital program by, I don't know what factor Terry used, but probably 20 to 25% of every project has escalated and cost that much. So everything went out of whack. I also want to remind the board, we did a bond issue in 1996 for $100 million. We did a bond issue in 2005 for $131.7 million. Prior to that, the most recent bond issue was 1973. So we went through this big window when District 11 was exploding. We were building out Norwood and building schools and everything, where we never issued bonds. And so while we were addressing the need to build new facilities, we did that with COPs and a couple other mechanisms. We weren't addressing this aging infrastructure of schools built in the 50s and 60s. And so that's what started getting us behind, and then compounded by the pandemic. Suddenly, it seems much more serious than it was before. In Colorado, I've laid out the different options for funding capital improvements. I did a survey of other districts. Not every district responded, but the predominant method of doing capital improvements is with general obligation bonds. General obligation bonds are tax exempt for the investor, so the district gets a discount on the interest rate as a result of that. And we will have the interesting distinction after December 1 of being the only large district in Colorado with 0 bonded indebtedness. It is the predominant method. By the way, when a developer builds a development, they're required to give us land or fees, but if it's big enough, land, but they don't pay for the school. So districts use bonds to build new schools for new neighborhoods as they build out. And you only have to look at D20 bond levy, which is 10 times our bond levy, because of all the schools they've had to build in the last 2 decades. So one option is general obligation bonds. The advantage of general obligation bonds is it comes with a revenue stream to pay the principal and interest. It's a tax that every taxpayer in D11 pays, and we use that tax to pay the principal and interest. So it doesn't have a financial impact on the rest of the district. The disadvantage is you need voter approval. Maybe that's an advantage depending on your perspective. But you do have to get voter approval for long-term debt in accordance with Tabor. And so it's a little bit more complicated. It takes longer. The other option is certificates of participation. We call them COPs or COPs in the business. They look like a bond. They trade like a bond on the market. They're double tax exempt, but it's actually a lease. And because of that, you don't need voter approval because in theory, the district could terminate the lease. So it's not a long-term debt. Now, realistically, that's almost impossible to do because you would ruin the district's credit if you didn't appropriate the lease payments. But it works legally, and so districts use lease because they don't need voter approval to expedite capital projects. The best example I have for that is the previous board voted for the district to issue COPs to fund the school improvements for Academy ACL Charter and Roosevelt. So the district issued those COPs, and they both were the benefactors of these beautiful new additions to those schools. And so we helped them. I was actually the one that coordinated the financial transaction to get those proceeds, and they did it at a perfect time before the pandemic, so it worked out great. The next option, if you don't use bonds or COPs, and remember COPs don't come with a repayment stream. There's no tax with them. So you have to take the money to pay the principal and interest out of your general fund or your mill levy override fund or capital reserve fund. That's all. You have to pay that off with your own money. So you have to adjust your budget some other way to pay that back. The other option is to either fund from the mill levy override general fund, which is about $20 million per year, or in this case, we are looking at general fund balance. Fund balance is non-recurring. It's a perfect use to use it for capital. Of course, we want our biggest bang for our buck with fund balance. We want to impact student enrollment and student achievement. But Terry has plenty of needs, and he will be submitting lots of requests, I'm sure, to the fund balance committee because we have $75 million to work with, which we've never had before. So that's the other option. If we don't do one of those options, then we'll just do the best we can with the annual mill levy override capital reserve transfer of about $20 million. Yes, sir.
Why can't we do all three?
You could. Of course, you'd have to go through the election process for the bonds, the COP process, and adjust the budget accordingly, and the fund balance. You absolutely could.
The hope is we'll at least do two of them. The fund balance is going to be there and there.
Yeah, so just to finish and then open it up
Yeah.
turn it over to Terry, maybe to talk about the project, is the one advantage is if we go this year, we could use that same language without increasing taxes. According to our bond counsel, Kim in Denver, who's amazing, and she's actually drafted a sample election question, which was in that memo I sent to you. We are the only district that has ever failed a question that says without raising taxes. Prior to us, nobody had ever lost that election. Now, last year was weird with pandemic and everything else. Who knows what happened there, but we were the first one to fail that election. So we could go again. The problem is we've gone from 6.5 mils to 2. So we could only do, at the time Terry was doing his presentation, $118 million. And unfortunately, interest rates are moving against us because we don't know how much we'll be able to issue until the day we sell the bonds or COPs. You sell them the same way because interest rates change every minute. And so right now we're at 108 million. We've already lost $10 million. It could go the other way by the time we issue bonds. You just don't know. But whatever, we're probably going to be in a band between 100 and 120 million that we can do. So it's a dramatically smaller capital construction project. So one of the questions the board will need to think about is, do you want to take advantage of this window to do a without increasing taxes question for a 100 to 120 million, knowing that we might also do COPs and fund balance? Or would you rather wait, let the levy drop to 0, and potentially go for a bigger bond issue in the future knowing that it will, at that point, you won't be able to say without raising taxes. It'll say, shall taxes be increased by this amount. Just anecdotally, I will say previous boards have looked at it from two different perspectives. One camp is, let's go for what we can get because something is better than nothing. And the other camp is, we should ask for what we really need rather than going back to the voters multiple times. And that philosophy worked for the 2017 mill levy override. Originally, we were gonna go for a much smaller mill levy override, and the Board of Education at that time, and I think Julie was on the board back then, they said, you know what, this is what we need, we're gonna tell the voters what we need, and this is how we're gonna spend it. And we went forward with that election question and won. So that's kind of the logistics. So time-wise, I put a copy of the election timelines in that document I sent to you today. You have until September something, I wanna say 10th or 11th, to adopt election question and certify that to the county election department. Typically, we go through a non-action process, and typically that is August. So we do it the second Wednesday, we do non-action, the fourth Wednesday, we do action, and then if the board agrees, only the Board of Education can put an election question on the ballot. Then we send it to the county and they put it on the ballot and off we go. Also keep in mind that the Fair Campaign Practices Act kicks in on the non-action date, not the action date, which seems counterintuitive. We were actually sued by Mr. Bruce over that issue and lost. And so it is the non-action date that the Fair Campaign Practices kicks in. That's important because the district by law can only spend $25. $700 million budget, you could spend $25 for a campaign. That's it. So really, it's a zero limit. In addition to that, district staff cannot advocate for or against any ballot issue or candidate on district time or on district property. So all kinds of restrictions ramp up once you have it on the non-action agenda. So we have to be very careful about that, and that's why we typically have a campaign committee that does that, and they can do whatever they want. They're required to rent the facility if they're doing a school presentation. They can do a lot more than district staff can. Most of you know that I've done many election questions, and I've personally gone to every SAC, PTA, and staff meeting to help educate our people about what we're trying to do. But we have to be careful about how we do that. We can't advocate for that. But it's my belief that educated voters make good decisions one way or the other, and so that's the way we've typically handled those kinds of things. Last point of order on the whole election process, and it just slipped my mind, I'm sorry, but it'll come back to me, is so we have to watch the Fair Campaign Practices Act as we go through, polling. So it has been determined that the district can pay for polling. And we polled for both the bonds last year and for the mill levy override 4 years ago. It typically costs in the neighborhood of $40,000.
40,000?
40,000, it's not cheap. You hire a professional polling firm and the district gets to pick the questions. They offer suggestions, but we get to pick the questions. Often the poll will include questions about the board or the superintendent or various things about the district. We can poll to see what the pulse of the community is. Because there is a general rule of thumb. If you don't have 60% in favor on when you poll, you should probably think about stopping. Because you lose ground between the poll date and election day. Now I'll tell you, we had 1 year, we were at 54%, we went and we won. So it is possible. But you know, if the poll came back at 45%, you'd probably clearly want to just stop and say, okay, the community's not on board, we better just stop and wait. So know that that's an option too for the board. So that's a lot, I talked a lot there, that's a lot of logistics of how this could work. The board may want to go forward with the smaller issue now for 22. Maybe you want to wait and go for a bigger issue down the road. Maybe you don't even want to go at all. The problem is every year it's getting tougher and tougher to maintain our facilities, and we're asking Terry's team to do more and more. We typically say duct tape and Band-Aids is how we're holding things together. And it's not always pretty when parents are complaining, especially if it's something that's very visible, like the air conditioning is out, at a school, and it's very visible, then we hear all the complaints. So with that, Terry, you've already narrated your PowerPoint, but do you want to just summarize what you basically told them?
Well, first, make sure everybody knows it's John Furta. He's my capital program manager. So John and his staff put together these notional lists, and they are notional. As Glenn mentioned, any and all input is important to us. This was a snapshot that we took 3.5 weeks ago. So it was before a lot of world events have happened. And it was just our look at what we could do, what we can't do with the money. So what is not included in here are any major renovations at any of our schools. We just can't afford that with this amount of money. At least it wouldn't go very far. So we were trying for a little bit more balance of approach. So I felt it was important to show what initiatives, what projects we were putting out there for the fund balance. Because if you were to ask me what some of the most pressing, urgent things that we've got on our plate right now, it is those notional fund balance projects. Okay, the state law that just dropped the lead in drinking water as soon as it gets signed to 5 parts per billion is pretty significant. The project we talked about is only correcting to that federal 15 parts per billion. It's not going lesser. In most cases, what we're doing gets us below that threshold. But these are identified things that we know are out there that we're going to have to address. And when you talk lead in drinking water, that's one of the more emotional topics for a parent of a young child. And so I'm not going to debate whether or not 5 or 15 is the right number. The state says 5, we will work towards less than 5. Okay? That drinking water repairs, we've refined that number. It's actually about half of what I put on this slide. My project manager, John's project manager, is continually refining his numbers as he goes through this study and repair project that we've got going.
What's the timing on that will come down to us? Do you know?
Let's see, it depends on if you're talking PK to 5 or 6 to 8 in terms of timing. The original version of the law said all school from PK to 12th, but it was also 1 part per billion. The first compromise was 5 parts per billion, only PK to 5, and then at the last minute, to get a few more votes, I think, they added middle school in there. The part that scares me is from day one, we're going to be on a clock to report what the lead in our drinking water is. Since we know it, we're going to have to report it. Once we report it, now it got emotional. Okay? That's why I'm putting in for a fund balance request to fund that project.
And why do you feel it's more urgent?
Yes, because I want parents to know that we are stepping out. We are not waiting. The rules haven't been fully developed yet by CDPHE. So when those rules come out, it'll be more definitive. But it's that initial 30-day within testing. So for us, 30 days from the date that the law is signed. Because if we're going to go on the last 2 years of effort, that clock starts immediately for us.
What are the teeth of the law? I mean, if you don't do it.
Lawsuits?
It's serious. It's serious. And even at one time, it allowed for a fine on the school district. It was a really aggressive bill. We did get that mitigated, but it was an aggressive bill.
Is there any talk of knowing that all school districts are going to have to adjust funding
Oh, they don't do that.
to help?
They did appropriate some money, but what they don't know, no pun intended, they think it actually pun intended, they think it's a drop in the bucket. It's not
Yeah.
gonna be near enough.
And,
So,
That was a bad one.
and the money that they're appropriating is for filtration, not for corrective actions.
So how much would it cost for filtration if instead of going for these repairs, and you're saying this is only half the money, so the full money is going to be $27 million?
No, he's saying that their new projections are half of what he has in here.
Yes.
So only like
So-
6.7 million.
So we're talking, with the exception of Chipeta, somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 to $3 million to fix our district. And I'll just leave Chipeta out of the discussion. Initial cost to install filtration is gonna be somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million. And then it comes with about a $500,000 annual maintenance tail, because you're gonna have to change those filters out on a recurring basis. So when I do the math, you know, that's a neighborhood of three-year payback. That simple payback, it doesn't make sense to treat the symptom. In my mind, it makes sense to treat the problem.
Just fix it now.
I just would hate that there might be a money available that we go ahead and spend out of our general fund and then we have already, used our money when there's money that the state could.
They don't look to see what we've spent, they look at the requirement.
What do you-
So we'll submit the project. They're not gonna look in our books to see if we've already actually done it.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be able to-
we can still get
yeah,
that money
yeah,
later.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and just the testing that they'll pay for, just to give you an example, they'll reimburse, I think it's $25 per test. It costs us $60 to $75 to do those tests. And it has to be a state certified lab, so just imagine the backlog and the error rate that could be interjected in there. And we've already done the testing.
Yeah.
So,
So again, are we going to get money back for the testing? The $25 that you're talking about per test?
there's a potential, but just like with all grants, it would be handled through BEST. There'd be a huge administrative tail on the end of it. So yes, there is a possibility for reimbursement, there's a possibility of funding, but it's not gonna be enough to sustain the project or the initiative.
And you have to jump through hoops to get it.
Yep.
Right, but we are faced with $700-800 million of capital needs that our district needs, and so the more money, any money we can use.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's my thing, and when Glenn, you're talking about they're at least appropriating money to put in filters for right now, are we going to get that money if we go with major scale repairs and we are not going to put filters in place? Maybe at least they are providing that filters for the first year. Would it behoove us to get that money to install filters and then go about doing the thing? So otherwise we're not
Well,
going to do it.
one of the arguments that are statements that I'll make going forward is if we are ahead of this, we can actually use it as a marketing tool. We will be not only in Colorado Springs, but in the state, we will be leading the way. We will have guaranteed safer drinking water than any of the other surrounding districts in this city.
Yeah.
And again, lead in drinking water is an emotional issue.
We do have several schools where we're constantly being hammered
What do you mean?
by parents.
Really?
Mhm. Several.
Steel Elementary being one.
Yeah, Steele's predominant. I've spent more time on Steele alone than any other school.
That parents know there is lead in the water there
No,
and
They're just extremely questioning,
Oh, okay.
demanding
Is it Steele
to
in
see
North?
water samples.
Steel specifically. So I won't go over all of the projects there on the fund balance request unless there's additional questions on any of those. And
So
then,
this is going to be a total of $38 million request for that fund balance, which we are talking about 75 million. So almost 50% of
yes, sir.
the money.
Or it'll drop to 31, right? Because of the.
As we refine that number, yes, we will give our best estimate on the fund balance request.
But still, a big chunk of
A
that.
big chunk, yes. So when I move to the bond projects, you know, the big things are infrastructure. HVAC with $170 million plus of requirements. You know, this 31 million, you see where we anticipate that would go to. And it doesn't fix all of our HVAC woes across the district. Again, this is when we fix a school, we are going to put in what the new requirement for the equipment is. We're not doing replacing equipment in kind. So if the school does not have air conditioning, it would have air conditioning afterwards. That's the standard that we're moving to, but we're not doing it just for air conditioning. We're doing it because the HVAC equipment is old.
Yeah, your own boilers.
I do have a little bit of a concern there is some of these schools were earmarked for reconstruction. And as we go down this path and do all of the work on the infrastructure, we're no longer going to have a replacement school as a viable option. It would then be a major renovation. And if we do that major renovation, yes, ma'am?
I'm sorry, I was waving at John, he looked like he was glazed over, that's
If we do that major renovation, then we're gonna have to figure out where the kids go during that renovation. We cannot do it in 8 weeks in the summer. So that means most likely a modular school, or potentially part of the school could stay in operation in modular, but there is going to be more disruption than our original plan, which was to build a new school on site before we demolish the old school.
The only way we could do that is we got the bond.
It would take a major bond, more than $100 million.
Right.
How many schools is that we would have to do that?
In the facility master plan, there were 8 schools identified for rebuild. That was Jackson, Midland, Rogers, Taylor, Wilson, and West. And then we were going to combine Taylor and Queen Palmer in a new school on the Galileo side.
When you say rebuild, the 8 schools for rebuild, that was tearing them down and building a new school on the
That was
site?
actually building a new school on the site. The facility master plan looked at the site and said there is enough physical space there that with minimal disruption to academics, mainly outdoor activities, we can build a new school and then move the student body into that school and demolish the old school.
I like that.
Because the facility master plan, when it was put together, one of the tenets of it is minimize disruption to the students. So every student would move one time. If you're talking a renovation project, you're gonna move students at least twice. You're gonna have to move them out of a space, and then you're gonna move them back in the space. There's a whole art to how you do dominoes and impact smaller areas and move the kiddos around. And that would have to be site by site, depending on what we could do. You know, it could be as significant as taking a site with open space, and I'll use Jenkins up on top of the hill. You could build a temporary school up there and then bus all of the kids from Jackson, notionally, up there for a year until their school is done, and then bring them back. But because that's outside their neighborhood, that's gonna be pretty tough to do. Or you just put more portables on the site and do it locally. But again, you're limiting the amount of work that a contractor can do during a school day with all those construction activities. You know, and then you see the roof repairs, you know, $16 million is quite a bit of roof work. And then we get to CTE renovations, and we already talked a little bit about that. And we're gonna start this next year. John's working with Dwayne on sequencing the projects. It may not be go into one school and do all of the CTE renovations at one time. Really depends on what we work out with the CTE folks on how we spread that out and do it. It may be more focused on, one program at each of the schools, to be determined. Okay?
I don't know if this is something we wanna take the time today to speak about details, but I would just be curious to hear what that looks like. When we're saying CTE renovations, I don't know what that means exactly. Is it the auto shop at Wasson needs revamped or, so like I said, I don't know if we can take the time today, but at some point.
Sure. Preliminarily, we're learning very quickly what Dwayne's looking for. And that
Dwayne is here, so.
Hey, you tell him that.
How do you want to spend your money? So, after the bond failed in November, we were made aware that the Whittier sale could be earmarked for CTE, and so we were asked to do, we had worked extensively on the $30 million package that would have been included in the bond, and so we immediately were asked to do about a 10% scaled down priority list. And so we went to work on that, and then when the Whittier sale became finalized, I provided facilities that priority list. And so you can look at the facilities master plan to see the extensive literally $30 million view. But the priority list, we identified 6 areas that we think are, one, the most bang for the buck, and relatively within our, we don't know what the budget is yet because we haven't put out for an RFP. But the first priority that we identified was upgrading culinary spaces, middle and high school. And so that would affect almost every single school site, Holmes and Sabin. Middle schools, Sabin would be recognized as our eastern side middle school with a family consumer program equal to the Holmes, which is a pretty famous program on the west side. And then, of course, revitalizing the culinary spaces at Doherty, Roy J. Wasson, Palmer, and Coronado. Mitchell does not have a culinary space. Those students come to the Wasson campus. And I don't remember in the order exactly of priority, but our second, and that was our top priority, is getting our culinary spaces up to speed. And that really includes where CTE and Mr. Glitich spoke to it. I can cover a lot of the equipment needs of these programs through the funding sources that I can bring to bear. I can bring a stainless steel commercial kitchen into that space through my grants. What I can't do is I can't change the hood. I can't lay down stainless steel countertops. So those are the kinds of revisions that we're looking at, is hooding, venting, stainless steel upgrades, because that's a sanitary upgrade, those kinds of things. Another space that we identified was a vital space, was at the Coronado Space, their STEM facility. We'd really like to capitalize on some ideas of putting in glass or plexi walls so people can see what's going on in these CTE spaces. And we're underutilizing some of our capacity at Coronado to access some facilities that were implemented originally in hydraulics. And we need to do some remodeling of that building to get access to the hydraulic powers there as well. Also at Coronado, we'd like to give the Coronado teachers a private facility. Right now they share restrooms with students. And so being able to give, one of the things that they've asked as a staff is being able to have a private restroom without having to go back to the main building in between passing periods. So trying to integrate that as one of our priorities. Fourth priority was the urban agriculture program at the Wasson campus and capitalizing on that gorgeous space at Wasson. If you've ever seen the greenhouse, we have a plan to revitalize the greenhouse, revitalize that open space, incorporate that space not only as an agricultural and an urban space that integrates our hydroponic farming, but also create a space so that our catering program at Wasson can access that without having to go through an academic space, like literally putting a door in there. And perhaps we can use that as a student enterprise space so that our students could provide catering opportunities, small weddings, et cetera. So that our agriculture, we could literally do a farm to table event. So that was a priority. Those are our probably biggest priorities that I can recall off the top of my head. And we don't know that the 3.2 million is going to extend into all of these, but this could give us an opportunity in an RFP to actually kind of see what it can afford, and then we could determine from there what the $3.2 million then gets prioritized toward.
So that's the 3.2, but not the
13.2.
13.
Well, some of those, if the 3.2, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong, if the 3.2, I mean, these are big projects. If the 3.2 couldn't cover all of that, then we're starting to scale into that $13 million. And I'm quite honestly, I think there's 2 more items that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. Those are the big ones. Coincidentally, our automotive spaces are pristine. They're beautiful. They're actually really good. People are enviable when they go in there. Could they use improvement? I'm sure. And we could find some special electrical work. We'd like to see our aviation space at Mitchell. I think that was also on the list. Our aviation space, when we closed the automotive space, the plan was to move into aviation sciences. And while we have that program at Mitchell, turning the automotive space into an aviation space requires some overhaul. We'd like to be able to start building an airplane in that hangar.
So I know I've had conversations with you, Terry, about the Wasson campus and the boiler is in a fully cemented
That's
room.
the HVAC units, they're up in the ceiling, actually.
And they're just completely surrounded
And
by
there's
concrete.
yes, it's basically encapsulated in a concrete room that they left a manway access to.
So knowing that we could run into trouble someday with that equipment and needing to access it, how does that play into these changes we want to make at that campus? And
Typically, when we go in and renovate a CTE space, we would look at the holistic requirements for what's needed by the program. So when we talk culinary, when we talk industrial, ventilation is key. Basically exhaust fans. And so those are independent of the heating and cooling system. It's just air changes to get toxic stuff out of the spaces.
I guess what I'm asking is, to access that equipment, are we gonna have to tear things apart that we may have, like say in 5 years, tear that apart that we just remodeled?
No,
Okay, they're like completely separated.
we would plan so that it would be independent work as best we could.
Thanks.
So we have to rebuild, just to add to that, we have to rebuild what's in there. And so those are giant air handler units. And so our HVAC subject matter expert, James, basically it's referred to as stick built. And so we have to demo what's in those and then bring in piece by piece and build them like Legos and stick build them from scratch, rather than having them built at the manufacturer, cranked in, dropped in, and done.
Is that your intention to stick build, or are you gonna put a whole,
I'm
we
hoping
just-
we can find another solution,
put on top of the roof
but
somewhere? Yeah,
but then we have to look at the loads.
right.
Roofs may not be stressed for that load.
Lot of area.
Terry, given the dramatic increase in HVAC, which has just kind of gotten crazy compared to a lot of improvements, is geothermal an option?
It is an option.
Because we've had great success. This building is geothermal. And the best example I can give is our newest generation of schools, like Freedom and College, their utility bill is about a third of the previous generation. And so we have hundreds of tubes in the parking lot below the asphalt that are pulling the air out of the earth, and it's constant temperature. And we use a circulating pump, Terry's engineering, he can explain it better than me, that can either make it cool or warm depending on the time of year. And it's expensive,
On a retrofit, it's very expensive.
It's very expensive, but given utility prices and given how much HVAC has gone up, we should at least investigate it.
Yes.
Thank you for that overview, appreciate it.
Moving on to another very emotional subject is security vestibules. You know, realize we put this together prior to the Texas event, okay? Years ago, and I'm not sure exactly how many years ago, we went out and with our security department, surveyed all of the schools and identified the most urgent, those most critical that we needed to do security vestibules in. So the difference between the notional first group of projects and the second group was the first group are the ones that were more crucial, the priority ones. We already have security vestibules at 11 of our schools. And I think it's $10 million to put in security vestibules at the rest. The most pressing are the ones that you see on slide 6. And we put a couple pictures of what that looks like, you know. When somebody comes through those main doors, a visitor, they're in an enclosed room, great visibility by the staff, limited ways to get out of that room into the school. And at Adams, they've actually tried to go through the pass-through window, and it's kept them out. You know, parents get pretty emotional sometimes, and especially when there's custody issues, we have to vet these parents. And this is the best way to control the access. Buzzing somebody through the door and then expecting them to do a right or left-hand turn into the office may or may not happen. They could go straight through. There's been instances where it would be 2 adults. One would distract the office staff and the other would go flying by. So.
Other thing that I notice is somebody buses in and people that are walking behind them walk through the door at the same time.
Yep, tailgate.
Or the receptionist is so busy, you've got dozens of people pouring through the door at the same time, you know, you just can't handle the line.
You know, it works well when it's the time for kids to go to school, because you got staff actively monitoring that door. But other than that, it's not actively monitored.
And did you say that to do all of our schools would be 10 million?
In that neighborhood. I'd have to add up between the 2 slides. Actually, no, it's more than that. 3.6, yeah, 11 million.
But that was a couple of years ago, right?
We've updated these numbers, so it should be pretty close.
Okay.
The study was done 2018, 2019.
Just making sure because of what,
You know, we've
it's gone up?
we've padded,
Yeah, that's good.
but
For security
we're
measures,
finding it's still not.
maybe now's a good time to talk, I don't know, good time to talk, about putting cameras in classrooms. But like Wi-Fi, you don't have to wire it.
That would have to be a question you take to John McCarron about the technology of doing that. And I don't know what the emotional or legal aspects are of that.
My understanding is the district did look into that and recently pulled cameras. Is that right, Sherry?
That is.
Recently what?
Pulled them.
There were some pretty serious privacy and confidentiality concerns about putting cameras in a classroom.
Privacy, what, the teachers wanted more privacy or?
No, that we may have a student with significant learning needs in a classroom, and when we put cameras in that room, that learning need may become visible to those who don't have a legal need to know about it.
Well, you could address that.
Yeah, I do know that we
Take a
worked with our
principal
attorney
action
on that.
So maybe that's a conversation for some other time. I think that sounds like a loaded conversation that when you said you worked with the attorney on that, like, okay.
So, so, you know, moving on, we've got things like.
However, we do need to do an assessment on the location of our cameras.
Yes.
That's one of the things that we're looking at this summer and wanting to do an updated security assessment. And I'll give you an example. I got after I sent that letter out to all of our families about what we do and what we're thinking about doing. I've received a lot of information from parents, and one parent shared a situation at one of our schools where, we know you have an issue or a concern with the way our staff will buzz people in, but did you know that the cameras don't always show our people at their desk who's at the door? Something needs to happen with the camera at our entryway. There's a great example of why we do need to take a good look at the position of all of our cameras. Sure enough, I went out to that school and that's the case. That camera doesn't really show you who's at the door. So we do need to take a good look at cameras.
What about hardening our schools?
Well, same thing, that's,
Well, when I'm talking about, I'm talking about putting people there with the weapon.
well, that's part of what our assessment's going to do for us. We've had some families that have asked us, hey, you have security guards at middle schools and high schools. Have you ever thought about elementary schools? Look at where most of the incidents occur.
Right.
That's some of the kinds of things, but we will have a security assessment that will come back and advise us on those kinds of things.
So also identified in our priority needs are some disability or I should say accessibility improvements. At North Middle School, we have a staff member who has a mobility restricted child at this school that, the school has worked with them to move programs to where it is accessible. But there is a significant part of that school that is not accessible, and it does put stress and strain on the staff trying to accommodate by moving programs. So we're looking at doing that, and that particular staff member, one of her asks is when her child goes to, I think it's Palmer next year, that Palmer be a little bit more accessible, for that warm and welcoming feeling there. Because right now, most accessible bathrooms are staff bathrooms. So the kid has to go to the office to use the bathroom. That doesn't make them feel welcome. And so this is just starting to buy down some of these requirements that are out there. And then I've got Kiss and Go on there. Our Kiss and Goes around this district vary widely. The notional fund balance project addresses are by far our worst need. When you go out on two major streets and one of them being Constitution in the morning queue, that is completely unacceptable. We have got to do something to protect those students and those families. But it doesn't stop there,
Which one's on Constitution? I'm sorry.
Madison.
Yeah,
So,
right there.
and then if you look, I put a couple of pie charts in here that kind of shows that if we take out the big HVAC project in there, it does pretty much spread the requirements around the district.
So on the Kiss and Go, you said Madison goes out on the Constitution, but it's not listed here?
That's under the fund balance.
Fund
Oh,
balance,
okay,
the
thank
previous
you.
one.
That one's by far the largest undertaking that we need to do. These would be something more along the lines of what we have at Adams right now versus, we've got other schools like Columbia where the drop-off is literally on the curb, on a street. And buses on one street, parents on the other. That is less than ideal.
On your video, with the north elevator installation, I couldn't quite hear it. Did it say a second elevator?
Yes. Being an old school,
Yeah,
the additions over the years don't quite line up everything. And so, yes, it's a second elevator at that school.
So it's gaining access to a part of the school that the
That is
original
correct.
elevator doesn't gain access to?
Yes.
So it just made me think about like Galileo is a two-story building. Also, does it, are there other schools that we need to be thinking about that kind of thing?
There are a litany of things that we need to look at for accessibility. And
West Middle School, West.
yeah, the older the building, the more challenging. and most of those are gonna be external shafts for the most part. I think Galileo has an elevator that accesses all floors equally.
I think
And
so
I'm just
too.
using that as an example, I know we have multiple schools that have
Yeah,
multi-level, but
and
just
John's
wondering,
staff has been charged with coming and putting together a full accessibility assessment so that we can systematically buy off on these. Under the American Disabilities Act, where we're vulnerable is we do not have a plan to address everything. To date, we have been very reactionary. Reactionary is what causes you issues. Because if we don't fix things in a timely manner, then we can get sued.
Liability.
And when you think about like a middle school student, for example, if we don't know they're coming, and we start planning in 6th grade year, they're in 8th or 9th grade before our processes let us get to there. So reactionary is very dangerous. So having a plan where we can systematically go through is the right way to go forward with it.
and you guys are working on that.
And we're working that.
So in the budget, we have, I think, about $750,000 allocated towards ADA
Oh.
improvements as an ongoing, and last year was $250,000 as we addressed, and as we're getting the MLO projects completed, we are understanding that is a much greater concern to be proactive rather than reactive. And so we're allocating $750,000. But when you're talking $400,000 for a high school bathroom, that doesn't go a whole, that's 2 bathrooms in the district.
Yeah.
Not even. So that's why we're asking for money in the bond.
One quick question, Terry. The HVAC replacements, you talked about $31 million, that's set aside. Is parts of Coronado air conditioned right now?
I think it's mostly the offices. It's not
Not
the,
much.
Okay.
Not much.
So this would make the whole building air
Yes.
conditioned? And how much is out the $31 million is just for Coronado?
18.
18. And you have Doherty in there too, so Doherty is the rest of it,
Doherty is newer. I think they have some air conditioning.
That's more of a controls issue where the controls are outdated from the original.
so it's
Gen
not for the
1
whole
control.
HVAC replacement out there, just for some parts?
Correct.
Okay.
It has a new boiler, I think a brand new boiler, they have some new rooftop units, but
Okay.
So then when we move to the next set of bond projects, a lot of the same, but I want to point out just a couple. Auditorium and renovations and the high school track and field upgrades. Through the facility master planning process, those came in right behind CTE in terms of community importance. We are currently allocating a little bit of funding every year trying to get there. But what this would do is it would allow us to accelerate and do those things a lot quicker. What the studies have shown is that kids that are involved in a lot of the extracurricular activities are good students. Matter of fact, I was just told this morning that the lacrosse player of the year is on the honor roll, happens to be this guy's son. But it just shows you, because they can't participate if they're failing in their classes. And so I think those go a long way. And, the community did identify those, and we've just been trying to buy them off.
All 4 high schools, all 4?
Yes. And then RJ Wack on the auditorium.
Yeah.
There.
That's it.
we already have Coronado in the budget for this year to be redone.
When I was in some of the plays and things like that this spring, parents just learning who I was, they're like, can we have new auditorium seats? And that was Doherty, and I thought, this school isn't even as bad as some of the others. So it's interesting to me too that that's just this ongoing need and ask from our community.
Well, and they're very visible public spaces too. And then, just a lot more of the same type projects. And I do have, a slide that shows what a front entry renovation can look like. There's 33 schools, I think, on that $10 million list that we could spruce up. And during the facility advisory committee, I was asked, well, why do we care about the front entry of the
Oh, my
door?
goodness.
Well, first of all, if it's a warm, inviting entry, people are gonna show up with the right attitude to learn.
Sure.
When you don't know where the door is, especially for a new family, if the parent is frustrated, the kid's gonna be frustrated. And anything that we can do, and what we talked about is kind of a pure per pupil allocation of funding there, just so that the larger schools could get a little bit more, they have a little bit more needs, but more importantly, work with the principal on where they think those dollars could be spent in the most advantageous manner.
I went to, it's an old school, Queen Palmer, old school. But when you walk in that door, that floor blinds you. And they made do with an old school, but that's what I remember going in, and I remember going out, that's how important the entrance is. And she's doing it with nothing but wax, but she's doing that. I told her that's impressive.
Yep.
It just stands out.
So this almost $10 million, is that, when you talk about front entries, is that also security, like the vestibules?
No,
Or just purely speaking
the vestibules
aesthetics?
are separate from that,
So this is just aesthetics?
yes.
10 million, okay.
Or, it could extend into the school to, if the front foyer is where the priority is, it could be there. But the whole idea is to set the stage for learning as people come through the door.
That's right.
We set aside X amount of money for every school listed. And then based on similar sized schools that we have done the front entry, multiplied by 25% for inflation, times another 10% or 20% when it's actually gonna happen with construction rates. And this is the number we came up with. And the FAC committee, they're the ones advising us that it'd be best to take that money allocation and let them figure out how they wanna beautify the front of their school.
What's the FAC committee?
Facility advisory.
Okay, thank you.
And we meet once a month.
So Terry, one of the things you have Queen Palmer HVAC out there for $3 million. If we go by the FMP, it specifically talked about, you mentioned repurposing some of the schools. Are we at this point in time ignoring what the original FMP called, and we are going to be investing in some of these schools that were targeted for?
Well, if the school remains open, we need to have adequate ventilation in that system. I'm pretty sure that is original construction, or maybe it's been replaced one time in its years, but we don't have much life left in that system, so if we're gonna keep the school, we need to put a new system in there.
What school did you mention?
Queen Palmer.
Queen Palmer.
It was targeted in that original FMP. So if we are investing in those schools, then we are not able to turn around enrollment. At some point in time, we are going to have schools with 150 kids, 125 kids. We already are there at this point right now. So.
Yeah, it's a catch-22.
And are we going to be investing in those schools for renewing and because we're keeping the schools open? It's a conversation we may have to have with the new superintendent.
He was talking about earlier, building a new building and bringing Queen Palmer.
Queen Palmer, was a consolidate with Taylor on the Galileo site, which is much more preferable.
Well, we don't have the money to do that.
But we don't have the money, you're right.
Yeah, I know. We don't have the money to do any of that.
So again, this is a notional list. If we do go forward, the list will change based on if we have a committee, the recommendations. We can detail it out.
I think one thing that would help us too, and I realize you have a lot of slides here, but that would help us if we do go forward and we do have a committee, is direction from the board on what areas are of concern and you would want to go forward with to do with the bond. Terry's given you our urgent maintenance needs, so I think getting some really good direction from you prior to the establishment of a committee that we could potentially put to work during the summer, should you choose, to move forward. Having that kind of direction, we would be able to come back to you with the types of projects or indicators of things that you want based on what you would want to go out for a bond for at that time.
It
So
could be a shopping
we would-
list. We could list,
we wanna look for some direction on the categories and things. As you can see, I don't know, I've been following you with your slides, we've got a good comprehensive list here, but is there something that we're missing? Is there something that you think we should be addressing instead? And the only thing I would ask is keep in mind, the assumption I think was on page 2, I think we were talking about 118 million, Glenn?
We were at 118, right now we're at 108.
Okay, 108. So we would still wanna try to keep within those confines as we go forward with summer work, if this is where you wanna go. And then we still need to decide if you wanna add anything else to the election question beyond this.
Okay. So any feedback on the projects itself, Glenn? Jason?
It sounds like you answered already, but of that kind of 700 plus inflation backlog, what you have here is top priority for safety, comfort of our students and professionals, and pretty equitably distributed across the quadrants of our district.
yes.
Excellent, I love that. Okay, second thing that I would like to potentially add, when you guys are thinking about the, not only security vestibules, but also like the front entry remodels, is how we can add, like on boulevards of some of our schools, some xeriscaping or something that provides some
Water
appeal.
might help.
So that was included in that number.
Is it?
It was
Okay.
about $100,000 per listed
And,
school.
and when we would do, a kiss and go, we just cannot, we're gonna disturb more than the pavement surface.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be some xeriscaping things.
Like I think about Mitchell's parking lot and how nice the little xeriscaping is around Mitchell's parking lot. Something as simple as, two-tone different rock and some, grasses that don't need to be watered goes a long way than weeds that need to be mowed and are growing over the curb.
That's a great,
Like Stratton, they just need water and something.
And
I don't
just,
even know if there's
just to
water.
let you all know, I was approached because of a tax client of Glenn's about, she has 2 Life Scouts looking for Eagle Scout projects. Well, the discussion really evolved, okay? These 2 Life Scouts, they're both young ladies, and they're having trouble finding Eagle Scout projects. They think that part of it is passive discrimination by adult scouters that don't want to sponsor projects.
or girl Boy Scouts.
Yeah, so these are female scouts, okay? Well, these 2 young ladies I talked to, not only are they Life Scouts, they're working towards a Girl Scout Gold Award. They are, I'm not sure what venturing scouts call their highest award, but they're looking at that too. So with these 2 young ladies, I think I've got 6 Eagle Scout type projects coming in the next 18 months or so. Okay? On top of that, the mother is a leader in all of these organizations, and they need conservation projects. And so starting this summer, we're putting together a list right now of all of the low-hanging fruit we have around the schools, and we're looking at scout labor doing a lot of these projects. So it's just another example of a full court press that I'm doing. And the beauty about these conservation projects is every one of them can be done on a facilities work order. So I can buy materials. I can facilitate it, they give me the labor. So, if it's a Cub Scout service project, obviously it's gonna have to be a lot less robust than an Eagle Scout project, but we're hoping this summer that we actually can implement some of these projects for these scouts that are having trouble finding them.
Oh, wow.
So,
I even thought you could have a local landscaping company adopt a school and then make a contest between these landscaping companies that you let the D11 community vote on. And this got the best xeriscaping project, I don't know, just to get, and then there would be a tax write-off for the xeriscaping company, for landscaping companies, but.
and there's a possibility that we could get some donors there for especially Eagle projects.
And if we could, because they're a D20 parent, if we could embed that into our D11 troops that use our facilities, because we have lots of scouts that use our facilities, boy, we could really leverage that. By the way, the highest award for venture is the Summit Award.
The Summit Award.
Come on,
So-
Scout.
An Eagle Scout.
I think I'm kind of going back to Dr. Gleditch's point of like the board helping guide what the priorities are. I think I'm a little bit confused on how we're defining urgent needs and, you know, an HVAC not working and kids sitting in a 90-degree classroom in my mind is an urgent need versus a front entry renovation. You know, I guess I see the logic in how we want that appeal when people walk into our schools and especially if they're touring and they're new families, but just the measure or maybe it's categories, like we're gonna spend this much money on maintenance and this much money on renovations. I'm not sure.
Critical
I'm-
safety concerns is
Yeah.
HVAC and lead and water. Revitalizing for curb appeal is XYZ.
Yeah.
You know, comfort for our students and staff is another category. You know, safety, whatever.
Well, and you see pavements on there, we've got pavements out there with cracks literally this wide. They're tripping hazards. So,
But I think I heard you say in that video that's a stopgap measure. So did you say that with the closing of the?
on a lot of it, yes, it's patching the cracks, not repaving the lot.
Right. It's temporary.
So, and.
So, but we are spending, when you look at the budget, it adds up, this kind of payment replacement over years. Every budget, we are spending $600,000-$700,000, so it keeps adding up. And that's the same thing, but for the lead in the pipe, we are doing a whole-scale replacement at this time. So,
Well, again, in terms of urgency, in Terry's opinion, lead is a lot more pressing need because once you ingest lead, you never get rid of that lead. So it's a cumulative effect over time. Whereas a parking lot, you sprain your ankle, staff member sprains your ankle, maybe we have a workman's comp claim. We're talking, it shouldn't kill a person, whereas the lead over time will.
I agree with you, Terry. The only problem I have is we are getting these unfunded mandates from the state, and the federal law says one thing, it says 15 parts per million is safe or whatever it is, but the state now comes and says 5. The local can come tomorrow and say it's 3. Which part do we comply with? I mean, it just becomes like, how many hoops do we have to jump through when all of them are unfunded and it falls on us to figure it out. So I'm just the frustration that I share when we have so many different things that.
We're willing to put together, whatever list of projects. However, if you think that any of these are off base, I'm willing to push them aside.
No, for me, I can only provide my feedback and the board can provide its feedback. And you are the expert in this area, so take what I say with a grain of salt. When we are talking about 700 million to 800 million of deferred maintenance and we got to go to our community now after the bond failed this last time, we got to go back to our community this fall and ask them for this money, okay? So we got to be able to demonstrate to our community that these are critical and immediate needs for our schools. I've started already reaching out to our business community to support something like this, just getting a pulse as to where they are. And the feedback that I'm getting is that if it is a critical and immediate need, and you can justify it as what Dr. Gleditch is talking about with some type and Dr. K is out here, student performance achievement, then the business community is willing to support us. Okay, but we got to be able to demonstrate that this is a critical and immediate need. And for me, all I can do is the projects, when we have $800 million worth of projects, safety of our students, is it improved academic outcomes? And maybe that's like the student learning atmospheres, having air conditioning. That's going to help them in August and September. Otherwise, they are exhausted after the second or third period, and it's not productive learning environments for them. And does it help increase enrollment? those are the lens that we need to look at this project, and that's the only guidance I can give from my end. Are they making our students and staff safe? It is optimal learning environment, so it improves student achievement, and then increasing enrollment. Those critical needs, then the board can go and sell to our community that this is absolutely essential. So that's the only feedback I can give on that.
So maybe I can help. So Terry, Glenn gave me charging orders: life, health, safety, and keep the doors open. In 3 weeks, we didn't have time to have community meetings and understand what was going to happen, or talk to every board member and get a pulse of where everyone was. So I brought my staff together, who are subject matter experts, who have an ear to the ground, who understand, who are many parents, and we determined that our primary, what we put in our first tranche is they are going to keep the doors open, they're going to keep the kids safe, and they're going to keep the kids healthy. And that's what we did in our first, what is it, 80 million? 70 million. And then after that, and then CTE, because we all understand that we have to show that we're spending money for education purposes, not just the bones. And so right now, if some of these schools' air conditioning goes down, we're shutting the doors. And it's going to take, some of this equipment is 48 weeks to 52 weeks just to order it, not including the 6 months to redesign the equipment. And so we're trying to get ahead of the game here on these things. Some of the HVAC controller systems is first generation that we can't control anymore, and they're non-serviceable. So we are literally in the facilities department, they're literally going on eBay to try to find replacement parts for these systems to control them. The security vestibules. Now, in our last facilities meeting, there was some dissent on how important they were. Now, this was a week before the shootings, and she was quite vocal that we were wasting what I have, 4.7 million?
Yeah.
$4.7 million in security vestibules that we thought for the priority 1 schools only. And that was in the tranche 1. Again, what we believe to be very important.
Did you change your mind?
We have a next talk conversation.
No. I thought it's best to lay that one. She understands. Listening to in board meetings, the front renovations, we decided that we have declining enrollment, and we decided that in order to stop that was to reface the what we look like, because when the kids have pride in when they walk into it, they're going to be prideful when they're there, and they're going to take pride in what they do while they're there. Again, we work at the pleasure of the board, so we build stuff. You tell us what you want us to build, and we'll come up with some awesome projects for you. And I appreciate Glenn and Terry for listening to me, because when they sat me down and said, how do you want to spend the money? I said, how does the board want to spend the money? And so that's exactly what Glenn's coming to you. So thanks for listening, guys.
The counter that I have is the board does not know exactly what the $700 and $800 million of repairs that we need. Until we know the whole list of projects, we can't prioritize. So that's why we are depending on you. All I'm asking is, for example, if I go to Jenkins, okay, and this was even brought about by one of our superintendent candidates in the interview session. When you walk into that downstairs thing, there is this huge gap in the wall, that's this big. It seems like the whole building is sliding off the hill, and the doorway is crooked, and the floors are sloping. That, according to you, is not a priority improvement? I mean, is that building structurally stable at this point?
It has been stabilized. We check that crack annually.
Okay.
It's not moving.
Okay, so we don't need to address that as a priority improvement.
It's not shutting down the school. It's not
Okay.
falling off. The crack
Okay.
hasn't moved
Great.
from what.
Because for me as a parent, when I walk in, that is a big concern for me, and is that building, structurally stable? But if you are saying, hey, that can wait over the kiss and go modernizations or ADA bathroom remodels, fine. I mean, you guys are the
Well,
experts.
playground equipment.
Yeah, playground, yeah.
Well, the takeaway I get,
Well,
and I
the
like
it
this,
wasn't playground equipment, sorry.
no, the takeaway I get with you, with here is that we have set priorities, and I appreciate your attempt to align your building with our priorities. And I can see that, it's very, very obvious to me, so I appreciate that. And then, since we set priorities, we have to trust them to align that, and, because they know, like you said, they know we don't know.
Yeah.
So those decisions, knowing that you're doing your best to align them with the board priorities, is really good to see. I like that, because.
I cannot agree with you more on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you completely. I'm just doing my due diligence as a board member and just asking them, these are the top priorities that they have established. So when we go back to the community in August and September, we can put this up front and say, these are the high main priorities that we want funded through this $110 million bond. And then our community is going to respond by giving us money, so.
So if I could just round out the list, I'd be remiss if we didn't include something for the charters. The list that I put in the briefing is with the list that they gave us prior to the last election.
But we will have to open
We would
that
have
up
to go
again.
back out and see what their changing needs are, because that's nowhere near 7%.
Okay.
And then, one Director Ott probably likes is that energy savings projects. Again, anytime we go out after a bond, we would look to try to do operations a little bit smarter and save some of our utility dollars. Because, every opportunity that I get twice a year, I'll be coming back and looking for more money for utilities, so we can offset that a little bit by saving some money. And then the very last slide shows you the schools that would be without HVAC. If this was the plan, these would be the remaining schools that do not have HVAC. And it starts, it ranges from the 5.6 million at Galileo up to the 32 million at RJ WAC. It does not include South Admin, and it does not include my complex out at FOTC.
We do have, please.
Well, that's true. Ooh. Some of our building has AC. So-
It needs to be replaced,
So,
like much.
The 7% for the charter schools, a couple of questions. How did that number come about? Is that part of what's required for us to give to them based on bonds?
So the law says that we are required to involve the charter schools in the process. The law does not address a formula. So when the board was considering the $350 million bond, we went to every charter and said, please identify your capital needs. And here's the definition of capital. And they submitted their request back to us. I'm guessing we could have some different ones now. I know Director Lomas talked about Globe several times. They might be looking for a facility. We might have other requests, but there's no formula. We just need to involve them as we would anyway.
So I guess part of my question then is, like LSIA, is that right?
Mhm.
That now might be pulled into D11 if they meet all the requirements and everything and we approve them. I guess I'm just wondering, is that 7% gonna grow?
Well, again, it's not a formula. It happens to be, we think of 7% in terms of that's the percentage of our enrollment.
Right.
But we would include LSIA because the board has approved them. Obviously, that's a little bit trickier because they're not off the ground yet, but we would definitely reach out to them and include them. Part of the chicken and egg here is we're still not sure the board's gonna go, right? So how far do we go down this path before we put the brakes on? Because if the board's not gonna go, we should stop. Now, I don't wanna reach out to the charters and build their expectations knowing that we're not gonna go.
Well, I just First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge you all because I remember you, Glenn, going to the SACs, this was years ago. You've been at this for years. Same thing with facilities. I am just like, and I gotta be honest with you, I'm a little concerned because I know you're done. You know what I mean? Like, if it wasn't for you helping us to stay where we are for these last 30 years, I mean, what? And so thank you for the work, thank you for all that you've been doing for years. This is not new, it's not just a couple of months old, this thing has been here for a while. And all of that, now we're seeing retirements, cause that's when you were saying it, now we're in the season for this to happen and we're, ta-da, here we are, what do we, I just can't believe it's been that long and here. So yeah, thank you for prioritizing. I hear that you did. I get it. It's not easy to see like the building maybe falling off the hill, but I appreciate the fact that you're also trying to work with us with enrollment, trying to get because people love bright, shiny new objects. And if we're not gonna have bright, shiny new objects, we need to at least have curb appeal. That's just the way it goes, right?
Mhm.
People don't stay in old neighborhoods like they did, especially if they're building new houses out on Mark Shuffle. It's not how, so I get it. And timelines, you can't even get things in without ordering it 7-8 months ahead of time. So we still gotta be concerned about the cost of that shooting up by the time it hits the shoreline. I mean, it's insane right now. This is absolutely insane. And it's the most frustrating thing because I remember talking about all of this stuff for the bond. It was right there, clear as day. Thank you I appreciate you guys coming back patiently, calmly, professionally, every single time, working to get the same message out. I don't know how we're gonna open the ears for people to hear, but I appreciate you doing it every single time. We got tough decisions, I get it.
I think it'll help that we're not talking about repurposing campuses on this round.
Yet, or what I mean,
On this round, yeah.
whatever. I mean, I don't know if it matters what we're talking about at this stage. I don't know if it matters, because again, he's been saying it for 30 years. Terry's been saying it, what, 8, 9? 3 years?
3 for the district.
For a year, right? And the person before you was saying it. I mean, like, I don't know what it's gonna take for that to happen. It's just, it's absolutely amazing to me that nobody saw this coming. With all this growth happening in this city. I'm in awe.
How many years did you say that the district went without going for a bond?
So from 73 to 96, so 23 years during our growth boom.
Right, that's it.
But student enrollment was paying the way as it grew.
Partially, the district did use COPs to build Martinez, which was an interesting strategy back then, and Chipeta.
We still have a long discussion ahead, so let's be mindful of the time. So do we want to transition first before the board talking about whether they are at a point in time to provide some guidance to the district on wanting to go for the bond? Does Dr. K want to share the metrics that we are talking about that's associated?
Well, I think-
How do you want to go about
I
it?
think what would help us, I think, is that the direction the board wants to go?
Okay.
So like, does the board want to go into the direction of going forward with a bond this November? That would be helpful. Second, if you do go in the direction of a bond, do you want to tie an academic achievement clause into that? And then if you do, I think first you have to discuss that, and then we can give you an example or two, but I don't really know what direction the board wants to take in that area.
An academic, we could walk the bond through a park. Without it, it's not gonna fly.
That's,
Okay, let's first try, do we want to talk about first, so do we need to talk both? Do we want to talk if the board first wants to go for a bond?
I think so.
Okay. But it could be conditional from what Director
Sure.
Loma is talking about. He would say, I'll go for the bond if,
Correct.
Okay.
based on that. So,
It'd be good for us to know this.
okay,
could we, and I just wrote a note, could we do, because Glenn said we could write 2 ballot questions. And I like the idea, I think I was the one who brought up at the town hall about having it attached to some sort of metric. Could we do 2 initiatives where, based on what Glenn had mentioned, the first one we say, shall the district, not, without raising taxes, and then we go for the 108 million there, and that's one item. And then that's our, like John said, right, critical, safe, keep them open, all that. And then we have another initiative that would then read with voting for a tax increase, but that's the one that we then have attached to
Be honest.
an academic metric released within 5 years. So you got the one we go, hey, without raising taxes, can we get this one now, deploy this 108 million and get these critical things done? And then, 4A, or what was 4A, and then 4B, or whatever the numbers are, 4B is with raising taxes, but attached to academic metrics of XYZ, shall the voter approve another whatever amount of dollars we need to look at for these additional projects accountable to this DPF or SPFs, or 75% of our priority and improvement turnaround schools up to performance, or I don't know, whatever metrics we've talked with Dr. K about. Can we have 2 initiatives?
Right, and Glenn isn't here, and he would say we can have probably 2 initiatives out there.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, the only feedback that I can provide you, I think I've asked Glenn this question before, and what Glenn would say is, most generally, the public is going to take the path of least resistance and the smallest impact for them, and that would be the $108 million as opposed to when you put 2 initiatives in there. But we can ask Glenn that question when he comes back. What's the
I asked him that same question, and that's what he told me.
Yeah.
Was in the past, when districts have gone and proposed 2 options, the lower option tends to be the one
You asked who
that
that?
wins.
Ask
Glenn.
Glenn.
Oh, you asked him already?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did ask, I asked him and she asked separately, it
Not
looks
that
like.
it hurts to try. I mean,
Yeah, we can try.
I don't think it costs anything more to put a second question on the ballot. So
I think
especially like you said, tying it to
tying
the
it to
achievement.
some sort of metric.
Like, here's what we're gonna do for you if you'll do this for us.
So if it
Or
took you
if-
2 years to spend 100 million, you say in 2 years if the scores go up, then release that bond money comes into play.
You release an additional piece, but that's a tax increase, but we've showed you that we are good stewards of your kids and facilities.
And if, the other thing we also have to, by putting 2, is the community going to just say no to both, as opposed to just putting 1? Yeah, those are all the things that are unknown, and what's the boats? Dr. Glitich, you have any thoughts on it?
That's a risk.
Yeah,
And I do know historically it is the path of least resistance. Usually if one of the 2 will get approved, that's the one that will get approved. Or they both
Yeah.
die.
But either way, if you just put 1, you're gonna go for the 1. This one, at least you got a shot at 2.
Sure. It's a risk.
right, or you could get no on both, that's the
Or you get no on
problem.
both.
The community just saying, hey, you're being too, greedy or whatever it is,
Well,
and
the
then they say
reason the
no to
community would
both.
say that is because there is a lack of trust.
Yeah.
And so by putting a metric there, you have to build trust. I don't think the community cares about the money, it's more of the trust.
I don't know, Al, I mean, we are right now with cost of living going so, gas is $4 a gallon. How much impact is our community going to take on their pocketbooks when
When you talk about
and
kids, moms, and
Right,
parents,
okay.
it's a little different.
Well, the problem is only 25 or 30% of our families that live within District 11 have kids. Majority of them don't.
Yeah, but it's deeper than that, because they have employers, they gotta hire a high school graduate, it just gets deeper
Yep.
than that.
Yeah,
And we all drive by schools, whether you have kids in there or not.
yeah, it increases the property value if you have a good neighborhood schools.
With curb appeal. Shiny things, right, darling?
So we did do some research and we
Obviously,
didn't
it's
find
not
a
his
district that
district.
has
They all
tackled
need, right?
doing a
Double
bond with
standard,
an
right?
academic
Gotta think.
measure. So we would be the first in Colorado to do this,
Do the academic,
to have some type of
Yeah.
metric attached to it. We would be most like, we were researching others that did it so that we could get a feel for what happened and
Yeah.
how they were developed. You always look for best practices and couldn't find one. And I think Glenn told me that the individual that we worked with on our bond question told him that we would most likely be the first in Colorado to do that. And also in talking to just a few community members, not a lot, because I didn't really want to have this discussion out there until you have had it. Mixed feelings with a metric. Now, I'm not talking business people, I'm just talking community members, parents, people with no children in school. You know, some see it as a pay-for-performance type program. Matter of fact, that concept came up at Cabinet this week when we were talking about it with trying to get ideas and working with David, trying to figure out what we could potentially bring forward to you. That was one thing that came forward. Others, well, you know, but then others, oh, that's intriguing. So there is interest that exists out there. And then one that was said, and I didn't quite know how to respond to it, so I just stayed quiet. And it was something to the effect that, okay, so if you're going to put air conditioning on your bond, but you have to have a certain metric in order to get your air conditioning, are you saying you're going to punish kids because they didn't achieve at a level and don't give them air conditioning?
Yep.
And
Or clean water.
that came, well, that was the second one that came out. So that was something else that was said, and is that the image you want to project? So I'm just sharing you thoughts that were given out there, and that one struck home a little bit. That one, paid for performance, well, number one, I support it. So I was seeing where we were possibly going with that. We would get paid for creating it, but the whole idea of someone interpreting that as being punitive, and I don't think that's the intent, but that certainly could potentially be an outcome, an impact that others might feel. And we're saying district-wide we wouldn't release the funds, so we're not saying by school and their test results we wouldn't release the funds, but our community doesn't see that. And then the other thing that I brought up and I was trying to drill with Cabinet is if we do decide to attach a metric to it, it has to be a metric that our community understands. And so and the reason I'm saying that is, you know, I'm working on that monitoring tool. I'm gonna give it out to you this week, hopefully before you get your board priorities. And don't take this the wrong way, David. 0.5 will improve, right? I mean, well, no one out in the general public understands all of that kind of stuff, but if you live and breathe it, we do. So it has to be a really simple metric that your general public could understand, but that is meaningful for the school district to experience growth in academic achievement or growth. So that's where the school performance framework came into mind, because everybody seems to understand that common idea of a label that exists out there. So that's something else that I think would be a caution if you did. You need to make it, I'm not trying to say our public doesn't understand, but some of these percentages and things like that, standard scale scores and all of that stuff that we use, it's just not understood. So you don't want to throw them off by reading an election question they don't understand to begin with. It needs to be simple, you know, simple in order for people to understand, but simple with power or meat behind it. So that's sort of the input that we received, that I got from
Thank you
just
for
talking
sharing
to
that.
people.
I mean, that's valuable input. Different parts of our community feel
Different
different way.
perspectives, not the business, I haven't talked to anyone in the business community, I'm just,
Right.
you know.
The only thing is, we went last year with the same urgent need to our community, that these are vital needs that our kids need, our students need, our schools need. And our community, for some reason, did not respond back. And when Glenn talked about the polling, and we spent $40,000 on polling, the polling at this time of the year last year said that the bond was going to pass with a 74-26 majority, kind of like. And by that time, the elections came, it was 73% favorable rating. But by the time, 5 months later, the elections came, it became a 50-50 toss-up. Okay, so how much do you trust that polling? I don't know. Okay, but our community heard our needs and said, we have a trust issue with the district, that we can't trust you with the money to spend it as you say you need it. So we can either go back and make the same request and hope this time the community is going to respond back differently, or we can go back and say, your talk of trust, we got to respond back to that. And that's what the metric is coming from.
I think you mischaracterized that a little bit, just a little. It's not that the community didn't trust us to spend the money where we said, because that is very obvious that they do, it's tight budgeted. Is they wanted better academic.
That's exactly what I meant.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
okay, but that's where they felt that they spent this money, but the achievement wasn't there. And, because I know, everybody knows that the money comes in and is spent where it's supposed to be spent. You know, there's no like misappropriation, it's spent right. But that is, and they need like you said, they need something tangible, very simple, to grab a hold of and believe in. And through the last several, not only this, state ballots, all these ballots, we're gonna give money for education, and they're being taxed from the state, all these different things for education, then they're now the district more taxes, and nothing's changed. That's the perception. And so and you can't change that.
Let him finish it.
I will.
And so by putting a metric, something like a simple, tangible, then you can build the trust. Just like we had to come in here and build trust. That's where we're at.
Yeah, Julie.
Thank you. I was gonna let him finish for the record. I just had raised my hands a couple of
I
times.
saw you.
Okay, that time at least. So I am for a bond, straight up. And I think part of the reason, a good reason for this would be the reinvestment. We have utility costs and maintenance costs, which are also the human capital. And I think if we can get some of these things taken care of, we address those issues. And to the point earlier of, sorry, Lauren, I'm looking at you because there was something about something you had said. I know, I'm forgetting. But my conversations with people about why they didn't vote for it, some of them were mad at us at the board itself for bid day. Some of them didn't think we did a good job explaining how we were going to use the money, which we can only try to explain it, but we have to do a better job maybe. I have not heard, except from a few, about how it was academic performance. Kids, we're gonna punish kids, like you said. That's my takeaway. Sorry, third graders, you didn't do well enough in your reading, so we're not gonna improve that giant crack at your middle school. We're not gonna, we can't even get there financially, right? Because it might seem a priority, but it's not a safety issue. Safety issues are the vestibules, which we're not gonna give these kids because they can't read adequately by third grade. I understand the need for academic achievement, but you are holding up kids' safety, kids' health, and our staff safety and health, because we think that we need to hold the children accountable. And someone recently used the word extortion to me. I'm going to read you the definition. The practice of obtaining something, especially money, through force or threats. Or the practice of obtaining benefit through coercion. And that's what this is tying this in. So I want you to sit with that as you think about our kids' safety and their academic learning environment. That's it for the moment, thank you.
So I guess I hear what you're saying. I think my question in my mind still is, and I see the need for the bond, I haven't shared where I stand on it, but I would just ask you that there is, it didn't pass this last time.
I know.
There are trust issues, so how do we address that? Because I don't think the idea of tying achievement to it is, we're not trying to extort people, it's more of trying to build trust. So how do we get it to pass this time? What's changed that it'll pass now that it didn't pass in November.
We're gonna keep the doors open? I mean, it's not just a matter of trust, it's a matter of necessity. And I think if we came out 7-0 and we work for it, instead of having candidates that aren't for it, that would help. I mean, because you represent different voices, if we are 7-0 on it, that would help. We can't have just one person going to business, right? We will have a new superintendent who can come out and as well and hopefully support this. I mean, they better if we decide we wanna go for it. And we show the need. Our kids deserve no less, I guess.
I agree. I think I
There is no-
understand that you showed the need last time.
Apparently not well enough.
So
according
you're
With the
saying
7-0 vote, we showed that with the
I
7-0 vote.
understand, I understand.
We actively went and campaigned. And the only thing, my response to it, we want this bond to pass this time.
I know we do.
Okay, that's a priority. We cannot go back over and over again. If it fails this time, we can go a third time next year and say, hey, give us more money, when two years in a row it's failed.
We
So
sure
how do we put us in the best area for this bond to succeed? That's the only angle that I'm looking at, because I see the priority with the students, okay, that we need it, but we want the bond to succeed, and it failed the last time, and what if it fails this time too? So we can go and we can ask for $500 million too, because that's what the needs are. But is it going to succeed? Why are we going for 110? It's because it's got a better chance of success.
Right.
And so putting a metric in there, is it going to give us a better chance for success? And Jason, first you wanted to talk, I saw your hand go up.
Just a quick piece. I agree with Julie in saying, hey, the 108 million plus maybe another 48 that we somehow figure out with COPs or, the general fund or, our non-recurring funds we use as part of that. That all gets taken care of right away. And then if we look at saying, all right, that's, 150 of the 800 million, let's say. So now we'll try and cut that last 650 in half. So we'll go for another 325 million or 300 million, whatever the number is. And that'd be more for you guys, like what's the next, step B critical pieces that aren't going to impact safety, climate, that kind of stuff, learning environments, but are going to be step forward into, hey, the new bathroom renovations or, new auditorium seats. Those are the things where we could say, from a private sector, I get hired or fired based on my performance. And if I don't get hired, I don't get a paycheck and we adjust our budget. So I look at it on the other side of that coin of we need to perform for our community because we have not in the past done enough with the trust and the other pieces. So that's why I asked, and Glenn, you were out doing 2 bond questions where we go, the first one without a tax increase going for the 108 million, getting that money now for safety and critical needs. The second one attached to some sort of easy metric for the things like new auditorium seats and new cafeteria stuff or new classroom furniture or other things to expand the niceness of our district and to revitalize it and to bring it into the century. That would be how to balance both those out is what I'm kind of trying to.
Glenn, if you can answer that, then I'll go to.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I haven't thought of that. Somebody had asked me about doing multiple election questions, and lots of districts have tried that with either 2 or I saw one district that did 5 once. And what happens is voters, when you have 5, it's just overwhelming, I think, for voters. Typically with 2, they'll take the cheapest option. So if you ask for a $350 million bond versus a $100 million bond, they would vote for one but not both. But that's a different concept that I've never really thought about, and that could maybe work. You never know, right? But it might.
Never been tried.
Right.
Carly.
Well, I just wanted to talk about the trust thing that keeps coming up. It feels like there may be 3 different camps inside of the school district. The camp that's for it, the camp that's connected to achievement, and the camp that's like bid day, right? Because that's what I'm hearing as well. The employees didn't vote for it because they were upset that something didn't happen on their side. Now, that's not achievement as much as it is explaining a protocol or a process that they are not accustomed to after having it for 20-something years. That's different. But at the same token, D11 is one of the most transparent districts that we have in this city. I don't know of any time of ever living here where we've never had that. That's what they've always done. We've always had some type of meeting or something for the community to come in and learn about what D11 does. I don't know that for any other district in this city.
We
So-
agree with you.
But I'm just saying, we're 150 years old, so we have a lot more leeway with knowing how to do that, and we've done it. And we've put things out there, we've communicated, but then when it's time to choose us, they don't wanna choose us, but I'm still feeling like it's not necessarily a lack of trust. There's something else there, but that's the easiest word to say. Oh, I'm gonna keep you accountable. It's the easiest thing to say, but it's not really going into depths of really understanding what's the heart issue. It's a soul set, not necessarily a mindset. And I think when it comes to D11, especially after being 150 years, we're still working on automation. We're still working on coming up to the 21st century. There's so many things happening, and it's getting mixed up like it's all one thing, and it's not. And I think we have to be very careful of trying to, what is the word for it? Convince the community that it's this, when it's not necessarily trust. Glenda's been saying it for 30 years. That's not a trust issue, that's a hearing issue. That's a hearing dropping right into the heart, and you're setting your heart on saying, I'm not giving you anything you asked for.
So are you saying that the bond didn't pass this time?
Well,
You don't
based
think
on the
it's a trust
community, based on the employees, they said they didn't want to do it because they did not believe that we were being available to hearing what they had to say. Julie just said it. It was bid day. A good bit of people said it was bid day. I didn't hear anything about achievement either. However, if you go in and you start convincing people by saying it enough, you'll get them to believe that's what it is.
I mean, I heard that it was achievement, and I also
I'm
heard
saying
bid
based
day.
on us being here, with us being in this conversation, they're saying it was something else.
I
Just
think it's
saying.
both.
Well, it's both.
think
I mean,
it's both.
yeah, it's
Well, I said
factions.
3 camps. I didn't say it was 1 camp.
Yeah, exactly.
I said it's 3 camps, and it may be 4 or 5 camps.
Yeah.
But at the same token, everybody's pulling and asking everybody to do something, and we can't be everything to all people. We have to choose our course and ask the community, can you just allow us to be who we are? It's 150 years old. We're having to grow this into the 21st century. But you can't hold us back and hold the kids hostage because it doesn't look like everybody wants what they want. We have to be willing to have room to say this is who we are, this is what we do. Give us the space to do it. Let's not put it all on the kids, because if they don't look like, sound like, act like what you want, you're gonna all of a sudden say you can't have.
So I think
And I'm just saying, based on coming to 150 years in August, we should have at least the right to say, this is who we choose to be. We are not trying to push you away, we want you in, but you can't keep coming in trying to bust up the family just because it doesn't look like what you want it to look like. Either you're gonna be in the family or you're gonna choose to go and adopt. And we're not mad at you if that's what you wanna do. Please do what you feel you have to do, but we cannot keep putting pressure on everybody to try to be something when the outside people are saying, this is what you ought to be. We are core, and we have our core, and we wanna keep our core. Stop beating us up because it doesn't look like what you want. Let us be our family and let us work on what we have to do so we can get to it. We all know we gotta do it. Nobody on the executive team has ever denied that. Nobody on ESP, bus drivers, janitors, nobody. At the same token though, if you come in and divide and you're constantly putting in all kind of division, it will cause people to get really worked up and not know who to listen to. Not necessarily trust, but who am I gonna listen to? Oh, your argument is better. Oh, your argument is better. Why are we doing that?
So I think I hear what you're saying. What I'm hearing you guys say is you don't wanna tie it to achievement. You don't think that's appropriate.
We're saying just what Julie and Dr. Gleditch reported.
Yeah.
People see it as, oh, so if you put it on there
Sure.
and they don't get it, does that mean we don't give them a seat?
So my question is, like, that's just one idea that somebody brought to the table, we tie it to achievement, maybe that will help it pass. So then my question is, what do you both feel comfortable with that would help us ensure that it passes?
Well, first of all, I don't know what lies were put out there on the first one, but I think it needs to stop with that. Just like Julie said, either we're gonna come together or the lies are gonna keep dividing and then we're gonna expect people to come together and it's not gonna happen. House divided against itself cannot stand. So for me, it's got nothing to do with trying to do another magic trick to get you to like me. I'm glad, if you don't like me, I'm good with that. I'm just saying, can you let me do what I have to do over here?
That's not a good selling point.
We're not talking selling anybody. The
We have to
kids
sell.
need what they
People to
need.
vote for
You
it.
have to sell
First of all, it's like Julie, Director Oz said, the inside told us this is what it was. We're gonna work with the family and we're gonna ask them, can we come together?
When
And
you're
do
talking
this.
about family, are you referring to employees?
D11 family, we're gonna work on the D11 family and ask them, can we figure out how to do this? Cause I heard the same thing. It was the family that was upset. So how are we gonna work on that?
We
The trust
prioritize that.
issue?
We prioritize that this negotiation session, that we are going to take care of our staff. And over again, we indicated even to our staff who were at the negotiation table, make sure our staff at the other end feel valued and respected, whether we agreed or not.
And I'm saying,
So and those things maybe didn't happen last year during negotiations. That's where the big day came from, okay?
And I'm
And
saying-
also, the other thing that I heard at that time, one thing you didn't mention, the Mitchell High School, all the staff being let go,
Thank you.
okay?
Is that
And the
trust,
way
though?
it
You
was
see what I'm
handled out
saying,
there,
though?
the way it was handled out there,
Yeah.
there was complete distrust and broken this, again.
But that's family.
Yeah, it is,
Again,
it
and I'm
is.
just saying that if we can allow us to do what we have to do for D11 and work on it, all of the outside conversations trying to dip in and tell us who we are, you gotta back up a little bit. Let us figure out what we're gonna do to take care of each other. And when it comes to all that external stuff,
But
because I'm like, you've been
Darlene,
here 20 years.
that outside stuff is the people you're asking the money from.
When it comes to,
with no kids.
You're asking those people for the money.
that,
You
I'm not
can't tell them,
talking
"Hey,
people,
stay out of my
I'm
business,
talking
but give me your money."
conversations. I'm not talking people,
Okay, Julie,
You
I'm
have to
talking
talk people.
conversations.
okay,
Distinguish the two.
Okay,
I'm talking
Julie.
about the conversations in the people, not the people. We gotta figure out what it is that they're saying within themselves that comes out of them that makes this thing not move. There's something, whether it's offense, whether it's upset, whether it's just the fact that, again, I didn't understand it that way. And I'm just saying, based on what Dr. Gleditch brought forth and what Julie brought forth, they're just saying, does this mean if we tie it to that, will our kids not get what they need? We just have to figure out that
the only
intricate
response
part.
that I would have, and I'll come to Julie.
And I'm not really
Hey,
talking
the-
to you
the
per
only-
se.
the only
I'm just
response-
putting it out there.
The only response that I would have for that is, we as a school district and we as a board has to step up the commitment to our community and say, we are going to set achievable metrics and we are going to stand behind that and achieve it. Okay, why can't we put that, we are going to get our students to move. We have 5% of our African American kids at this point in time being proficient in reading.
Right, but
And
I'm not.
10%,
but
and we can't move that measure a little bit, and we are going to say.
But
to our-
wait. But when I try to tell you the insight on that, you don't wanna believe it. There's just a different level when it comes to, we've had this conversation.
Yeah.
And when I try to share, that's not how, I'm just saying, you bring in
But we still
what
have to
you think it
convince the
is.
community.
Okay,
You bring in what you think it is, And I am
I
saying,
am only looking for the numbers at the end, that's all.
listen,
What is the
listen.
cost? It is.
I'm
Let's
just
get to
saying
Julie.
that there's
She's been
something
waiting
deeper
patiently. Let's
than
get to
just
Julie.
that.
Okay, let's get to Julie. Julie,
Why are you cutting me off?
I'm not.
I didn't
She,
say I was finished.
okay,
You
then
have the
finish.
floor for about 10
Then,
minutes.
But I didn't say I was finished, or why are you cutting me off?
okay, finish your thoughts and then we can move on. Because Julie has been putting her hand up for several minutes out there. I just want to recognize that she is, if you're done, we can move on to Julie.
Yeah,
If
I
you're
was
not-
just wondering if you would give the same courtesy, like, oh, well, he's still talking.
We have been listening to you. We have been listening to you.
I know, I
Okay.
just thought I'd ask for the consistency, that's all.
Okay, we have been listening to you. I think,
Julie, by all means.
Okay, Julie.
please.
So certainly we're 7, 8, a dozen people. You talk to different people, some same people, whatever. Polling, which Glenn has mentioned, is a great way for us to reach out to the community and try to find out why some voted for it the last year and why some voted against it. And some may be academics and some maybe, we're gonna reach some employees there, maybe, they were upset with the district for what they saw as valid reasons. Some just didn't think that schools really needed funds. So I think, given, we could stay here all day and talk about what we think it is, but polling is at least one way. And so I think that we should go ahead with some polling if there's interest in this bond, which, and we could poll the question if Jason wants to on that, fine.
Only if the board wants to.
Right, but, you can poll a question and it doesn't mean we have to do it, right? But it comes back to what Dr. Goletich asked. Are we interested in a bond? Are we gonna move forward even with that part of it? So I feel like I should say we should call the question, but it's not, it's not voting per se, but.
Okay.
I have one poll.
Yep.
Everywhere I went, when I spoke in public, they asked me this question: are you for this bond issue? And I said unequivocally, no. I am not, I will not support it, and I recommend that nobody vote for it. And I got 24,000 votes. That was one poll. Right? And the reason I said that is for the very reason why I will not support any bond without academic achievement of tithe, period. And nothing will change my mind, because that's why I was elected.
So is there a way that, I don't want people to think that it's, if the kids don't perform, they don't get AC. In my mind, it was gonna be worded as the adults are the ones being held accountable and not that it's the kids. Like, it's our job, we're in charge of making sure these kids are learning. And so is it just a matter of wording? That the question on the ballot words it as that it's not people jumping to the kids have to perform, but that the district, the adults are the ones committing to performing. I don't know, just putting it out there. And
Well,
maybe it's
the
that,
tactic is always to shield himself with children. That's the tactic. And it's worked for decades. It doesn't work no more.
So we still haven't heard from Dr. K about what metrics or whatever it is we are talking about. So is there something to Lauren's request about attaching it to the adult being held accountable more than the kids?
and I don't know if this is, sorry to cut you off, but on the ballot, how much wiggle room do we get in wording? Like, can we say, recognizing that the previous bond did not pass, we are committing to the community that the district is going to make gains, that you will see improvement. And can we word it that way and then follow it with, here's the metric? Like, is there wiggle room in how we word
So
the question?
luckily, we have one of the best bond councils in the state with Kim Crawford with Butler Snow. I'm not an attorney, but I think as long as it's not in the first paragraph, you can do that. I can send any board member the draft election question in Word, and if you want to play with it, I can forward it to Kim. I could have Kim come to a meeting. I think the best way would be electronically, but you could draft something and I could bounce it by her and see if that would work. Most of the required language is up front.
Okay. All right, thank you, sorry. I just
So
wanted-
do you want to hear from Dr. K first before we call
Would you
the
like?
bond question that Julie asked?
Yeah, I think the visual of this is easier to speak to. And Dr. Bankus, I will share this file with you.
We haven't heard from Sandra at
We
all.
haven't asked her if she has an opinion either, so maybe we could do that after Change.
So to Director Nelson's point, this work of accountability will go on regardless of a bond passing, even being proposed. So what we don't want to convey is that, I wish Director Loma was here. What we don't want to convey is that accountability measures are dependent on getting a bond passed. Those two things are actually independent of each other. And so that's reflected in your metrics, that's reflected, we just finished up the symposium. That, all of that is built into the system. So I do think you are on to something that we speak to the fact that we are upping our game for accountability and expectation of adult culture and school culture to drive academic performance. That's 5E, resulting in improved academic performance. That we are pushing on that, and we have systematic approaches to do that. And to maybe distance that from the notion that a student gets AC only if they pass a test. Like I think that is taking the conversation into a place that I think we could probably mitigate. I'm no expert, and I'm not a PR person. So, Deborah. So,
Are you a lawyer?
but we could talk. I'm not. Goodness. So the fact that we have these measures in place already is, I think a point to Director Nelson, or just reiterating your point. So what you see on this page, and apologize for the tiny print, but if you look at the top cell, it kind of explains the basic idea. So 2019 is the last time we had a school performance framework issued. We did have testing last year, but there was no school performance framework issued from that assessment. So really 2019 is our baseline year, pre-COVID essentially. So 2022, if you look at column I, for 2022 are projected ratings based on end-of-year district benchmark results, and our rough projections based on within-year growth from 21-22. So these are based on our district benchmark. Actual ratings will be updated when received in August of 2022. So based on that, you can see that we are projecting that we will have more schools on improvement in 2022 compared to 2019. That's across the nation. I would probably say we have the possibility of having more priority improvement than I've listed there. Again, these are prognostications though. These are rough estimates. So for schools at turnaround, so this is the metric that I would propose if you chose to move forward with this. For schools at turnaround, a goal of 8% year-over-year improvement is set until priority improvement is reached. At which point, priority improvement, 6% year-over-year improvement is set until improvement is met, at which point 4% change year-over-year until performance is met. And then the goal is to remain at performance and actually continue to grow at about a rate of 2% change. Okay, so it's a stepped model, because the higher you, the closer you get to performance and maintaining performance, your ceiling is starting to squeeze your results. So to have the same expectation of growth, or I don't want to say growth because that confuses. I'm not talking about like median growth percentile. To have the same expectation of improvement all the way up the chain is not realistic. So we have to start to step it down a little bit as we move into improvement or into performance. I'm sorry. The logic behind 8462 is that model would take a priority, would move all of our improvement schools into performance with one or two exceptions, depending on how they perform in 2022. But for the most part, it would take an improvement school and move it to performance. It would also take a priority improvement school and move it to the top level of improvement. And if we continued on, it would only take another year to move it into performance. And it would take a turnaround school and move it solidly into improvement. So you can see the projected 2026 amount number of performance schools significantly increases to the point where what you're seeing there is that 73% of our schools would be at performance under this model. That would be about a 48% difference, or 48% change from projected 2022 to 2026. Those are numbers I think people can get their mind around. What we're looking at with this percent of points, what that means is on a school performance framework, you can think about it almost as a 100-point test. Right? So there are 100 points available on a school performance framework that school can earn points towards. And you disaggregate those points, so it's an ELA, math, at some grade science, but ELA and math is what we're really looking at. At elementary, 60% of that is growth, 40% is that performance. It's disaggregated by subgroups. All of these have a point value given to them that you can earn a set of points for. And ultimately you want to get you want to get the highest point value that you can. So you can see at the bottom there, performance rating is anything equal to or greater than 53%. All right. So it's really, we want to increase the points that we earn by school by 8 points. For schools that are at turnaround, we want to increase that on a yearly basis by 8 points until they get to the next level, and then it'll be 6 points, 4 points. These are attainable, and over 5 years' time, when we're committed to our goal, when we're committed to our strategy, they are aspirational as well. Yeah. Because 73% at performance will have a dramatic impact on our district performance framework. We will be a performance district at that point as well. So it is attainable and it is aspirational. And I want to say here that while I understand there are many unintended consequences here, and I value the really rich dialogue that's going on, because I think you're tackling some of those and really talking about them. We are committed to a strategy that I have said multiple times. Yeah. We no longer need to guess and hope for the best. Mm-hmm. We have a strategy that is research-based, millions of data points supporting it. That's the 5E, that if you improve climate and culture in a school, you increase the probability of academic improvement by 10 times. And if you have a weak area in a school, you decrease your chances of academic improvement down to 10%. You have a 10% chance. This is research. This is not hoping. This is not, sounds good. Right? This is not a vendor just telling us, hey, buy our product. And this is peer-reviewed research that has been out there since the mid-90s. This is what we're banking on. This is 5E. So by investing in school climate and culture over time, and we're committed to this over time, we should expect to see academic improvement, right? And that is what then, in the range of what I have in front of you. So I want to go on record as saying that if we are committed to our process with the one plan, with the summer symposium giving leaders the resources they need to really plan with their staffs, utilizing the 5E to its maximum potential, which I feel we are, then we have no reason not to expect improved academic performance. Does
So David, before they ask questions, I want you to clarify. In our monitoring tool that we put climate and culture in the monitoring tool for the board indicators with their priorities. With that said, would it help with the perception that's out there that I was shared about, are we punishing kids? That was a perception, that's few people. But there is a district indicator. In other words, our district has a district performance framework, and I think our district is at improvement, correct?
Correct, it's improvement.
The district label. So would it be advantage, instead of saying our schools will all move towards performance, that our district will move towards performance, because we are not a district of schools, we are a school district. And if our district were to move from improvement to performance, then that would mean we will have more brown school, what color is it? Green. We'll have more green schools going across here.
Yeah.
So maybe we would want to have in the question more about a district result and couple it with a 5E result possibly, because we really are talking about a school district performing, because you're always going to have a hiccup or two each year. And one of the snags within the pitfalls, I think, here is, so let's just say that I can remember the year, I don't know, let's say it was Palmer. Palmer was gonna be performance, but it was 2 less kids that took the test, so the state knocked them down to improvement. Now, whose fault is that? So, that's not a good thing, and you said that still happens, that you could still get reduced a label, and we had several schools that one year that were all at performance, but all got knocked down to improvement. We even had one that was at improvement, but got knocked down to priority improvement, because we had 3 kids who we needed 3 more kids to take the test. And this is parent choice. And we don't have a choice sometimes as to who does and who doesn't. So going back to it, would it be better for us to give the board something like this based on the district? And what percentage of points in the district do we need to increase per year for 3 years or 5 years to be at performance? Because I do know that, as David's chart shows, you'll never have 100% of the schools at performance. It just ain't gonna happen. It's just not the way it works, the old curve, right? But you can have a district at performance year after year. Look at I don't know, just look at a school. I wanna say Jackson Elementary School from back when, Jackson, improvement in 17. Jackson became performance in 18 and has kept it all the way going across. Something's going on at Jackson. And that took the word out of my mouth. It could potentially be the Abbott program there. However, you could also take a look at some schools and take a look at Doherty. Performance dropped down to improvement, then it went right back up to performance. See where you can drop or climb. I mean, a good test day, a bad test day, opinion, not a fact. But maybe you could do something for us, and if the board would be interested, maybe we could look at that, telling the community it's a district performance and not a school performance. That might take the chill off or the sting off of kids. It's
In my
the
mind, that's
district.
how I always thought of it. I didn't think it was an individual schools. I always thought it was a district. So I agree with you.
Can I say, Dr. Gleditch, I appreciate you bringing that understanding to the table as well, because there's a lot of people in a community who don't understand. You have a lot of parents choicing out. That totally affects it. And then they're sick, for whatever reason. If it takes just that small amount of kids to not be there, it can affect the whole batch. And that's huge for understanding, because there's a ton of people who, this is just Arlene talking, they come in their imaginations, and all of a sudden their imaginations grow so wild and hairy, before you know it, it's the district's fault. But nobody knows, wait a minute, we had about 2 or 3 kids out, and it just dipped. And based on the state level, that means we are now hitting improvement. That's huge, because there's a lot of people making things up
You're
and
right.
swear they're right, and they have none of that in their understanding.
And sick, and you can't get back during makeup testing day to take the test on makeup day, because you are sick. I
Thank
mean,
you.
that has happened.
I believe you, and that's why I'm grateful you
And
said
this
it.
year, unfortunately, it happened during a flu season. If you recall, we had, 160 kids out at Jenkins?
Yeah.
They did an amazing job. of
Yes,
getting
they
those kids tested.
did. They did. But
I,
that's,
huge.
I don't know, I don't know if the board would be interested in looking at, instead of trying to do a 8%, 6%, 4%, going from turnaround and maybe draw attention to the fact that we are improvement and we wanna become performance. We're not turnaround as a district. We are not in a turnaround.
We'd have
So
to,
in the bottom,
you'd have to define that.
in the bottom, Dr.
Nobody
K,
would turn around.
in the bottom, Dr. K, we have this chart that says over 53% is performance
Correct.
at the bottom.
If
Is
you
that
were-
the same for the district too? As a district, if you're, I think our district performance framework is 47 point something if I.
They do change it a little bit and they add a category, but it's the same concept. Yeah.
So if you move from 47 to 53 as a district, then we become performance.
We are actually relatively close to performance. We hover, as a district, to Dr. Gletcher's point, we hover, because prior to my time here, I think we were performance. No, we were performance, and then we dropped down to improvement.
How can we be at performance when less than 20% of kids were proficient in math in 2019?
I think we have been improvement. I don't know if the district was at performance.
Yeah.
Or
We did a
how
request to reconsider, and so what we utilized were some this was prior to my time, so I'm really speaking not out of a lot of expertise, so.
I
think
think
I'm
what would help is if
struggling.
we had the rubric, and you could see how the points are distributed, which is what makes you the level that you are, even at the school versus the district, which could help gain a better understanding of that.
I think I'm just struggling with knowing that D11 is in the bottom as far as the state and other schools, and yet we're not in turnaround. I mean, it seems like there's this, I don't know.
Well, I would rather have
Disconnect in my
percentage go, I see performance is 53%, right?
That's what it
For
says at the
schools,
bottom.
yes.
For the schools, and Dr. K says it's the same for the district.
Okay, if I did 53%, I get fired.
I don't think it's 53% of
You do
Well,
53%,
I know, but that's
I'll fire
what
you.
the state does. Jason?
interpreted.
We're gonna do better than that.
So, just a couple questions, and I appreciate Dr. K talking about the 5E. And you had mentioned something a while back, you were sitting here, I don't remember the work session, but you had said, based on this data, the nice thing is that even though the data isn't where we want it to be, we have all the tools in our family
Yeah.
to take care of this data and to elevate and to bring it up. And so I appreciate that, and then the data that we have on 5E, where we aren't just throwing darts at a board and going, hey, we just want everybody to be at performance, or, nobody on turnaround, or whatever it is, but the science of when climate culture is there, everything follows. And with, district admin, we see what happens in the in this year's projections of what, an ineffective leader does to certain schools. And, that's just, we've gotta make sure that we have that other piece to it as well. But I think if we looked at it might be easier on the ballot to read if it wasn't this block of text up here, which we understand in the education world, but just going, hey, we're at improvement and we're gonna be at performance, and maintain it, or something like that. So.
Just to go back, the district level for performance is 56% of points, of available points.
Okay.
And then there is a accredited with distinction, which is 74% of points earned. That's just at the district level.
That's right.
That's what I
Yeah,
want, yeah.
That's what we want.
But if you settle for performance, you never get there. You have
What was the
53%.
70 what?
74% is accredited with distinction.
They mislabeled that.
Yeah. It's been a while. And then it's 56% for the district, 53% is what's reflected on your spreadsheet for the individual school. I can send these other breakdowns.
Is that a sample rubric that it would Tells you how the points are broken down, so that you.
This is our actual
Oh,
preliminary
What?
framework
See
from
if Sandra has any
2019.
thoughts?
When will we get our label for this past school year? When does that come out?
August.
Do we get a DPF this year? A district performance framework and school
That's what
performance
they're
framework?
saying.
Okay, we do. Okay, Sandra, are you here?
Yes,
Okay, do you have any thoughts to add to this discussion at this point?
no, thank you.
Okay,
Wanted to check.
I do really like that the thought of doing it at the district level. I think it clears
Oh, say that again.
clears up. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. I think it really clears up. I think to Director Jorgensen's point, I think it clears up some of the some of that
ease of reading it.
stepped approach, as well as
I think schools.
takes it out of the school. It's on the district. We are together in this, and I think it would go a long ways to say you don't get AC if you don't pass the
That's
test.
what made me think about it, we're a family.
But my
Wow,
goal
love
would be, you said the 72 is what you call it?
74.
Performance with distinction.
Yeah, see, that my goal would not be
Credit,
performance,
credit.
that we would get to that point. That should be the goal.
By year 5.
I think everybody
Yeah,
will
you know,
agree with that.
or even if you
Would
said
you
by
be
year
able to
2,
do a
we're at
calculation
performance
as to
at
what
this
the
percentage, and then by year 3, we're gained 8%, and then by year 5, we're at that distinction, but, and then as we reach each yearly goal, they release more money. The next year, they spend that money that year, they release more money. But the goal is 74%. Then I said, okay, 74, to me, it sounds a lot better than 53% of performance does not impress me. It just doesn't.
The thing is with what Dr. K is talking about, that 8%, 6%, 4%, 2%. It
But
could
the
take
goal
us
is-
like another 20 years to get to 74%.
Why?
I mean,
Maybe
you
we
tell
can
me,
do a
Dr.
guess,
K.
a best guess on what that would look like.
Yeah, I didn't do any analysis of how this would translate to a
the district, yeah.
district
We could
performance
look at
framework.
that. But I think you could also put in your question that a percentage of funds could still be awarded as long as you continue to make progress towards that and you don't decline.
Yeah.
That's what I think I just heard.
Yeah.
Also, don't interpret this 53% as 53% of our students are passing. That's a different.
It's a different number, right?
It's that you're earning 53% of the available points.
I think that will be confusing to the
That
community
is
then.
So
confusing.
you don't want to explain that, you don't
They're
want to.
gonna think of it as 53 of the kids are passing, 53%.
They're gonna say that's an F.
Yeah.
Yeah.
53 is an F.
Right.
It is confusing.
We gotta figure out a way to simplify it.
So maybe we just all think about it. We don't have to
So
figure
first of all-
out that wording tonight,
Okay,
but
we don't need to
Create
make
our
a
own
decision,
concept.
we don't need to
Well-
make a decision on what metric to attach or
No,
whatever it is.
we just need to
Not
know
right
if you
now.
want one.
Yeah, first of all, then let's go around and ask if the board is first supportive of a bond for, is it $108 million, Glenn?
Well,
the way it is.
I think it would be better to say for the existing mill levy,
Existing mill levy of 2.1 mils.
2.16 or
Yeah,
whatever it is.
2.16, whatever it is. Are we, as a board, okay with going for a bond for 2.16 mil levies for this November? I see one comes up, 2, 3.
Is that with,
That's immediate release first.
huh?
I think, if that's all we did, we're just going straight there without.
Well, first, yeah, are we talking about, do you want to go for the bond directly without any conditions? Or is there support for that first? And if not, then we can look at conditional.
I would say if we're only gonna do one ballot item, I would like to attach some sort of the DPF to it. But if we're gonna have the opportunity to go, hey, 108 now for critical needs, for our children's safety and school safety and comfort, and then another question where we do attach DPF to it and release of funds, I'm on board for that too. Otherwise, if it's one question, I'd like to attach the DPF to that one question.
Okay, so let's look at one question first and then we'll go for two questions. One question, you had yes with no conditions, yes with no conditions, but you want conditions, you want conditions,
I want conditions.
you want conditions. Sandra, do you want conditions? If it's
Yes, with conditions.
with conditions. Right, that's 4 you have already there, and we need unanimous support on this to get there. So then do we want to go, if it is 2, would you like to go for 1 without any conditions? Okay.
Raise your hand.
Yes, Sandra, you want to talk?
Yes, I wanted to thank Darlene for bringing to the table the conversation that says by applying conditions that we are holding our kids hostage. And I think that part of what we are charged with is to make sure that we understand that is that what our goal is to provide our voters, to provide our stakeholders with the reassurance that they can trust us to listen to them in wanting to move the district forward in the sense of student achievement. And we will not come to them without putting ourselves in a position where we are focused on that goal. 1, to improve the environmental learning sites, and the other part is to make sure that we are always focused on moving forward. And I take very seriously that someone could, or there are those who may look at this as though we are holding kids hostage. I think we will have a lot to do to make sure that our stakeholders know our heart, and our heart is that we want to demonstrate as much as we can that we have the best interest of our children in mind when we make these decisions, and that we have the best interest of our stakeholders when we make these decisions to build that level of trust. I don't know if that's how we word the question or whether that is part of the campaign, but I take very seriously that someone could misconstrue our efforts to improve the performance of our schools as holding kids hostage. That just startles me. And I want to make sure that we recognize that that is a very serious charge against us. And as hard as we've worked to this point, to have that come back, our work is not done yet.
Stewardship, I think you could use that word, that we would be good stewards of taxpayer dollars in moving our district forward in academics with the district performance framework.
Okay. So going back to the question again, do we want to put 2 initiatives on the ballot then? Is there support for putting 2 initiatives on the ballot, 1 with no conditions and 1 with conditions? Is that a yes?
I would be for that.
Yes.
Is it that second question is for asking for more mills?
That's what.
It would be a tax increase,
And
but accountable stewardship to moving our district forward.
And does the first question still have the accountability piece, that we're moving the district forward?
No, it wouldn't. That would be to address Julie's and Darlene's concerns, which are all of our concerns of immediate HVAC, water, safety vestibules, things like that, get that done. But then the other nicer things like, man, this auditorium could have new seats, or, they could really use new furniture in this school, that kind of stuff, whatever else Terry has. Right?
So you had an yes, and I'm assuming both Julie and Darlene are yes for the two things, with 1 with this and 1 without conditions, or do you just want to go 1 with no conditions and don't want to worry about the second bond?
If that's that's extortion, right? Either way, you're holding us hostage. I would rather, if it's gonna take that to get the first question on the ballot, fine. But I would love to see polling on this, and I'm concerned about the precedent it sets for the future. Not just for us, but for the districts across the state of Colorado. And actually, I might add one more thing. I don't think it changes anything. okay, we have a district performance framework set up, which we're gonna have to explain, and that's gonna take more from everybody. But it also, if we don't get there, I mean, if there were another pandemic wave, if there is a wildfire that comes down and shuts down Chipeta and West and Howard, boom, there goes your district performance framework. There goes your participation and scores, because kids will have angst and staff will be upset because their homes burned down or something. So I guess that uncertainty that we're tying ourselves to, okay, never mind, you don't get your nice auditorium seats, which would, and facilities, there are people who used to come to Gary Berry from other districts and make fun of our and didn't want to play here because Gary Berry was in poor condition. So that's not gonna go away. They're not gonna wanna go to Sabin. Trust, I've talked to some of those kids years ago. They wanted new asphalt on their basketball court. We haven't done that for them since I've gotten here. So, I mean, those things are very real. And so it's more, curb appeal is important, absolutely. It's going to impact enrollment. So we can talk about academics, but we're also looking at enrollment. And so, again, we're holding our, I think we can focus on academic achievement and communicate that to our public. I think we can also improve our district. And I understand that that might be difficult to prove to our audience, but in the end, even if it's a district performance framework, you are tying yourself to, the kids will suffer for events that are out of their control. So, but if that's what it takes for this board, okay.
Totally.
Yeah, same. I do have a separate question for Glenn, if possible, though, once we're done with all of this.
I would rather have one larger one and with conditions and go for it. That's what I'd rather, instead of two. I mean, you know, say 500 million or 300 million, whatever we want to have, 400 million. And just go for it and push, because I really believe if we had conditions, we could ask for anything we want.
And we can merge that concept. But, you know, that's how we pro-formed it. We put, I think, 70 million upfront for our most urgent capital needs,
And then,
and then the rest, so without having a second question.
Correct.
right, maybe that's the way we go about it.
But then the first sentence is gonna read.
Increasing taxes.
Increase in taxes.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to protect us
Yeah.
from
Yeah,
with
that
the
is
two
true,
walls.
that is true.
Was to have two to go, okay, this one's no increases, but this one will increase taxes, but we're gonna be focused on moving forward with the district. We're gonna earn it.
But there is an identifiable opposition to this. If you got that requirement, there would be, that identifiable opposition would not be there.
So to Julie's question, is it possible to do some type of polling? And will that polling be, my concern is last year we did polling and it wasn't reliable. Glenn, what happened? So is that, how do we go about doing this polling?
Yeah, so we switched polling firms under the previous administration. I probably, we've kind of lost contact with most of those campaign people, I think. I probably would want to go back to who we were originally working with, which was Denny Hill. Denny did a lot of work for the district over many election questions. There is no doubt, for whether it's bond issues or people holding office, polling is different nowadays with the cell phone issue. I mean, the number of people that won't answer the phone nowadays, it really has introduced a high degree of variability into the polling results. But with that said, we still find certain elements that are right on target. So I don't know how to answer that question, but it would at least tell us something. Like it would tell us, if everybody came back at 40%, we're not interested, I think that would tell us, we gotta stop this train. This isn't gonna work.
We just make our own survey monkey and have a QR code and send it out through the district.
Is that reliable?
That's a question for him.
Yeah.
Their smartphones.
I mean, how do you make sure that, yeah.
I spend $40,000 for that, I can make a survey.
You'd have to have every phone in the.
I mean, political polling at that scale is
That's bigger.
I'm gonna chicken out on this answer a little bit, it's a different beast than what we do, so. It would be worth having some, don't wanna imply that we're not professionals,
But
but.
that poll costs $40,000 to do that poll?
Yeah, I wanna say the last one was even a little bit more. It was closer to 50, but we switched firms and I think we could probably go back to Denny Hill for, or more reasonable cost. And it does depend on how many questions you ask too.
And why did we switch firms?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay.
I think it was more related to the campaign manager.
So do we want to go polling? Where's the board on
I
that?
think that would be a good first start. We should at least do something.
Okay.
Get some kind of info.
I think there's consensus that we want some sort of bond, and then we just wanna know how to word the wording for that bond, and we should poll for that.
Okay, yes, polling good? Okay. Sandra, you good with the polling?
Yes,
Okay,
Do we need to decide tonight that we want 2 questions on the ballot, or is that like we can figure that out after we have the polling results? Like basically all you need tonight from us is
That
yes,
we're
you
going.
vote for a bond.
Yep. I also would ask, just because it's June, it would be nice to have 1 or 2 board members that were willing to interact with me as I work through the logistics. Because people are gonna scatter, we're gonna lose July, and we're gonna be so rushed in August to get that election question on the agenda. And I still don't know my status, so you know, all this could be up in the air, so it'd be nice to have a couple board members that could really keep things moving as we go through the summer.
And Glenn, with that being said, if we are looking at polling, what's the time frame for that?
It's pretty quick.
Okay,
Of course,
'cause
we have
if
to
we're
break
looking
all the rules that I'm trying to stop people from breaking.
Okay.
Because we're past the deadlines, but yeah,
Okay,
it-
and we're looking at polling to help support what that election question could look like?
usually the polling asks a lot of different things, including about the district and do you have confidence
Okay.
in the district and things like that. By the way, it's a public document because the district paid for it. If anybody'd like to see the last poll, I can get you a copy of that and you can see the results of
Okay.
that. But the primary meat of the poll is the election question and would they be favorable, would they vote yes?
Okay, so we could put a question into the poll, would you be more favorable to vote yes if we were to put a metric? Would you be more favorable? That's what I think we need to
I
get
think for sure we'd
distinguished here
want
to
that.
get some type of answer to our question. And can that polling all be conducted before and concluded like by, I'm just gonna make up a date here, like by the end of July so that the data is available to do an election question?
My guess is July 31st is definitely attainable.
Okay, it is.
That'd be my guess.
I just wanted to make sure we're all being realistic with
Yeah.
what we're.
For the
agreeing to.
$350 million bond, we literally did that poll on like June 29th. It was like the last day of the fiscal year.
Okay, I think Darlene had a question.
I was just wondering, Glenn, if you could put some insight towards that conversation about taxes. There's a lot of people thinking that the taxes are coming to education. And I'm getting a sense with everything that Karen Wick brings to us, we're begging them for the tax money because it's not coming to education. And I'm still trying to get through that whole, cause I hear that all the time, but I'm like, I think something's being misunderstood about how that tax money is actually coming from the state to fund education, because we're going through a whole bunch of initiatives right now trying to get something.
Right, I totally agree. You know, my guess is 99% of people don't even understand that of the $9,400 that we get per pupil, only about a third of it comes from local property taxpayers, the rest comes from the state. If you add the mill levy override, it's about 50-50. But we should talk about that, and I know that's one of, Deborah just stepped out, but with the new marketing position, that should be something that we should be on our people's radars.
I appreciate that, cause Initiative 63 is just asking, can we have just a third? Cause people are somehow thinking it's coming, and I'm like, you can't be at 48th in the country if it's coming. Something's wrong.
Well, I think part of the problem, a lot of the problem, is there's so many initiatives for education to get money, and hello, and they're backfilling over here, it's like, okay.
But most of them have been failing.
Well,
The last two significant statewide initiatives have failed, sales tax and income tax.
what about the marijuana? We're supposed to get money from marijuana.
Yeah, and then we get a sliver.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So all they're riding the back of education, and the people are fed up with it.
Yeah.
And then we're in the middle.
So we still need to provide some guidance to what Dr. Glidich asked about and what Glenn wants to know. The polling is being conducted, okay? But irrespective of what the polling comes, whether it is with or without, is the board comfortable going for a bond this year? First of all, and then the polling can determine whether
Well, I think we all have our little conditions, but I think we're all consensus that we wanna track that way.
Okay, yeah, we want to go for a bond, so we are comfortable with providing that guidance, and then at a later point in time, we can figure out if conditions need to be attached or not.
And the polling may help us with
The
that.
polling may help us
Then
decide.
meanwhile, I think I'll work with David through June, and we'll try to identify some options other than just the school performance framework. Maybe we can sit down with the 5E data, if that could be some potential. Maybe we can go through some of the metrics that you and I came up with for the monitoring tool. That might fit very well into that, and maybe like make it an adult metric, so to speak. So we'll work on that so you could have options if that's the way you end up going based on the polling information. And I think a lot of it's unknown until we have that polling
Right.
information.
And it's gotta be something that the public easily understands
Sure.
as far as the
I'll
metric.
test it on my neighbor.
Sandra,
Really?
are you,
Working.
because I can't see you, are you good for the bond?
Yes, I wanted to see the polling numbers, but yes, at this point.
Okay, then it's a unanimous, it's 7-0, we will go for a bond, some type of bond.
With
whether we need-
condition, unanimous. If it's
We-
unanimous.
yeah.
I'm stuck on conditions, that's
Right,
why,
I
that's why I got
understand.
elected, I can't change my mind.
That's fine, Al, what I'm saying is,
With a bond, let's go for it, let's try.
yeah, let's go for a bond,
That
with
direction.
or without conditions, whatever it is, polling can determine it, and you can certainly provide that input at that point in time. Okay, we are,
Thank you for
Is
this.
that-
We appreciate the
is that
discussion.
enough guidance, or do you guys need any?
I think it provides us with guidance.
Can I
on what-
have 2 board members?
Oh, two board members, two board,
Because,
Okay.
next Wednesday is our last meeting.
okay, so do you want,
When is your last day? Oh. Oh,
Last board meeting is last board meeting is this coming Wednesday.
but him, Glenn.
Glenn is still working, we don't have a replacement yet.
Oh.
So Glenn is here,
Wow.
we're working on that.
This place is the Hotel California.
So you can't go on
So,
vacation?
Mark,
is that an internal joke, Dr. K?
Can we, I'm trying to avoid that conversation. Can you please have two board members?
Yeah, well, I go golfing every
Right,
Monday.
I'm just trying to figure out what commitment are you asking from the board members?
So it will be basically representatives of the board to help me, I'll be coordinating the polling with them, I'll be coordinating the election question drafts with them, I'll be coordinating, we have to do stuff with the El Paso County, the clerk and recorder's office, in July, in terms
And
of
plus
spending.
Phoebe is your representative, right? Still, is she the district's
Who?
designee, Phoebe Bailey?
She is the designated election official, but Chris Odom does all the stuff with the county clerk, cause it's a
Oh,
contract.
okay.
So there's just all kinds of logistical things.
Okay.
I don't think it's a big commitment.
Right, I'm going to look at the board and see who is interested in participating in what Glenn wants. You are interested,
I can help.
you can help? Okay, I've got 3 people out here, and I'm going to say she falls because being the treasurer, so we can,
Yeah.
between the two of you, who wants to,
Arm wrestle.
okay?
I'd like to see the ballot language.
We all do, yeah, for
Yep.
sure.
Yep, I've got that on my to-do list.
Glenn, I'm also wondering if we could send out to all board members the suggested poll.
Yes, the old one,
Yes, sir.
or the draft poll.
The draft one that we
Yep.
would use, because I think if we send it to all board members, maybe you could be our point guard or the new superintendent, or whenever it happens, for additional input and guidance for that. That should come from all 7 board members.
Yep.
Right, that the language too, so I think that should be a given. So we need to copy all and just not one.
Okay, good.
So Al and Lauren, for your board member thing. And
Got it.
at what point in time do we include the new superintendent?
Right away.
Right away, okay. So even before, like we announce on Friday the new
No,
superintendent?
once you have a contract with
Yeah.
someone, you can enter in discussion, but prior to a contract, you really should.
Okay. Sounds good.
So
When's your
earlier,
last- Dr. Gladys, when's your last day?
Well, June 30th, and then I told Parth I would work 7 days in July for transition. And then just come back on my own time for a monthly cup of coffee.
With the new superintendent.
Okay, good, no. And how about you, Glenn?
So we're struggling with
Until we
my-
find a replacement.
Oh, thank you, Glenn.
So you're gonna stick around a little bit?
Yes.
Thank you.
So earlier, I just wanna circle back on things that I think you mentioned was needed, I don't know if it's tonight, about guidance for you on what our priorities are. And thank you guys for the work that you did, and I'm not saying that you had it wrong, it's just trying to understand if we have 700 million in deferred maintenance, is front entries already part of that, or is that something new, that kind of thing. So I understand that you wanna have a committee created to help guide that work, so do you need approval from us to start that, or is it you're gonna do it? I just wanna make sure we
I think
cover what you need
We're
tonight.
going to establish a committee and work with Sherry's folks and maybe have some principals and others on that committee to do the legwork of identifying those maintenance needs or those ideas as we come forward. And I think we do understand the idea of making sure we have adequate in each quadrant of the district so that there's something available. And then I think we will provide a definition for what urgent needs means in the facilities world so that it addresses children's safety and well-being. So we'll work on that, but we do need, now that we know that you're interested, I'm willing to say, Sherry, give me 4 people. You know, I'm willing to reach out and use time from people, because doing that at the end of the school year was just not reasonable to ask. So we did a standalone here, guys, and you did a great job, and I
Yes, you
appreciate
did.
it. But now that we know that the board has this kind of interest, this is the first time you've had the conversation since I've been here. So it's just good to hear. I think it's okay to take up staff time now. I want to value their time.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll put that into play, and we have homework this week before we go home for the weekend, don't we? Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
You guys
So
are
you don't
working-
need anything from
No,
us then?
I don't think
Okay.
so. We could do our work.
I think we start internally,
Yeah, that's our work, yeah.
but we'll involve the board too.
Okay,
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 Yes, sir.
before we leave, can we just talk Initiative 63 resolution briefly?
Yep. I think what Julie is talking about is the email that she sent us, and that would be a resolution that's coming forth in the next board meeting. Is the board supportive of that resolution endorsing Initiative 63? Is that right, Julie? Anything?
Perfect summary.
Yep. And Initiative 63 is taking some of the TABOR money, part of the TABOR, skimming off some of the TABOR
Yeah,
money,
it's
like what
really
you.
skinny. So it's 1/3 of 1% of the TABOR refund. And if that ballot resolution passes, that would go toward attracting, retaining, and compensating teachers and student support professionals. So it would affect our students. And again, given that we're in a teacher shortage and shortage of other student support professionals like pathologists, therapists, and things like that. So I would love to bring forward a resolution in
Would that
support
be-
of the initiative.
That item be on the same ballot when we do ours?
It will be.
I don't think it's a good idea.
Well, all we are doing is, as a board, saying we support it,
I know
and then
that.
it's still up to the citizens to decide whether they want to support it or not. Yeah,
I
agreed.
people that love Tabor, and if you go in favor of Tabor, then they're gonna say, well, I'm gonna go against you on this other topic.
Yep.
I think we should steer clear till we get this art thing settled, Because there are people out there that will live and die on Tabor, I'm
They are,
telling
they
you.
are people that are diehard Tabor folks.
Okay,
This is also though without raising.
I'm not,
Okay.
I'm not arguing the
But it's-
need for that.
But it's not taken away from Tabor, it's doing what Tabor asked us to do, to take it to the citizens.
I'm not taking away, I agree with everything you're saying. I'm not, but I'm saying you're gonna bring up a Tabor issue next to our issue, that's not a good idea to go hand in hand. That's what I'm saying.
okay, Sandra had her hand up. Sandra.
Yeah, I'm not clear on what this resolution is, I'm sorry. Can somebody, Julie, I couldn't understand what you were saying, what is it?
So, do you know about Initiative 63, Sandra?
No.
Okay, so Initiative 63 is, will ask voters, well, first let me take a step back. So it's not a SHRBA thing right now, it's a ballot question that citizens are trying to get onto the ballot, so they're collecting signatures for it right now. So one way that school boards can support this question, which I'll read to you, is by passing a resolution so that we can say, yes, we support this. The question is, should there be a change to the Colorado Revised Statutes concerning additional funding for preschool through 12th grade public education, and in connection therewith, without raising the existing state income tax rate, requiring revenue collected by the state from 1/3 of 1% of all federal taxable income of every individual, estate, trust, and corporation, as modified by law, to be deposited in the state education fund, allowing the additional revenue to be from revenue that the state or a local school district is otherwise required to refund to taxpayers in years in which a refund is due. Requiring the additional revenue to be used for attracting, retaining, and compensating teachers and student support professionals, specifying appropriations of the additional revenue do not supplant existing appropriations for public education, and requiring an annual report describing the allocation of the additional revenue. And the resolution that, if there's agreement, we would pass, it is that, there's a lot of whereases. Whereas we believe that every student should have opportunity and they deserve access to inspiring teachers, and public schools are, pillars of thriving communities. So it goes on, it mentions, Glenn, I'm gonna look at you, the amount that we have lost in funding since the Great Recession because of the budget stabilization factor was over 300 million, right?
Correct.
So it notes that and says, just, a couple of other whereases, but recognizing that these funds would be used to attract, retain, and compensate teachers and student support professionals, that we would support this initiative. So that's what it comes down to. So the resolution.
Did you understand that,
Does this mean it
Sandra?
goes on- Does this mean it goes on and on, or is this a one-time thing?
Forever, eternity, I think.
Well,
Oh, okay.
anytime there is excess, that 1/3 of 1% could be taken from, yes. So it's for the whole state, it could raise, I think they're estimating $900 million in the first year for districts across the state.
But it could only come from a Tabor surplus. In a year where there's no Tabor surplus, there would be no money, right?
Right.
Yeah. So if it is Tabor surplus, instead of refunding the money to the taxpayers, the state will keep a portion of it and it'll go to its state education fund and our teachers. That's my understanding. Okay, Glenn, do you know how much of that District 11 would get? Like if it's
I don't, 'cause we haven't seen would they, when I hear teacher salaries, I don't know how they would do that.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Okay, that's all it is. So Sandra, this resolution will support this initiative, the board saying we support the initiative. So the initiative still first has to collect all the signatures, get on the ballot, and then the general citizens have to approve the initiative.
Thank you.
The people against it said, that's another school tax. That's all they're gonna say. They're not gonna say nothing else.
Do we know what the impact, how much money an average taxpayer would get back in returns if they don't?
The projected Tabor refunds are large coming down the pipe because they've hit the Tabor cap. And of course, Colorado economy is still growing like gangbusters. In terms of the quantification of that, 1/3 of 1%. So basically Colorado income tax right now is 4.5% flat tax. Then 0.33 of that 4.5 would go to the state education fund rather than to the district, to the state general fund.
So we don't know what an average taxpayer would get back if this doesn't get.
We probably could do the math.
Yeah.
I'd need a calculator to do it, but
No worries.
yeah, 900 million divided by, whatever.
Well, I think they had estimated we would get $400 to $500 back per person this year.
This year,
Right.
that's
Right.
this year. Mhm.
So you take that, 5% of, or 1% of that is $5, right?
I don't think that's the math, Julie.
No, that's not the math I want, okay.
I don't think so.
So
Okay.
I personally have not researched this enough to know, do we need to decide tonight whether
Well, she wants to
support
bring the
it?
resolution next week, so we got to put this on board docs. We don't want to put a resolution there without any board support. And all we are going to do is to vote it down, and if there is enough support, that doesn't look good on us.
So in that case, then I would be inclined, I hear what Al is saying, that could it hurt us later? Are there gonna be people who see this as, I don't know, like, I'm trying to think of an example. When I was campaigning, I was advised you don't support other campaigns because you don't know what they're going to do or say, that sort of thing. Not support, that's the wrong word. You don't endorse. You don't endorse another candidate. And so I feel like we're trying to run our own campaign and we're endorsing something else that people might not agree with. And I personally don't even know if I agree with, I haven't researched it. So I don't feel like I can say tonight that I want to do this resolution. So that's my 2 cents.
Julie, is it time sensitive?
Well, signatures are gonna be
Hey,
due
Glenn,
July
did you say 400 per household?
Second or 23rd, somewhere in July. So
For tax.
if we don't do it next week,
That's the
because we
tax we're
don't have
asking
another
for.
meeting, which I hadn't realized before,
Huh?
before last week,
Exactly, so we're gonna be biting out the whole.
yeah, there wouldn't be any point to doing
Could we
support
endorse?
for the petition gathering. There might be in August if it makes the ballot, but that's the big question.
So later, if it makes the ballot, we can endorse it then if we decide to.
Glenn, with that another meeting, we do need to have another meeting to approve this new superintendent's contract, right? Like whenever we have this contract.
Right.
And that would have to happen, it's not going to happen next week, June 8th, I'm assuming.
You'll probably have a meeting after June 8th to award the contract. You could add anything to that agenda if you would like.
Special meeting.
So we do, to Julie's point, what I'm saying is, we do have to have another meeting at some point in
Right,
time.
right.
This month to approve. It'll be a short agenda,
Right.
one
Right.
agenda item right now.
Right.
It would only be the agenda items that you would bring forward.
So the way I look at our bond issue would raise a person's taxes, what, $200 you said? Per house? The limit, per how much would every taxpayer pay more for our bond?
Oh, for ours, it was $100
Okay, $100.
per household,
Per household, so $100.
depending on how much we really go for.
So if it's more, it's $100. Now, this measure is gonna wanna withhold $400.
No, it's
That's what you
not.
said.
No.
It's 1/3 of whatever it is that she's talking
Right now,
about.
but-
But it could be $50 for all we know.
Let's say it's 200.
Yeah.
But so then we're gonna say, not only do we wanna tax you 100, but we wanna keep $200 more of yours. We're chewing our own arms.
Okay, I just have to address this.
Sure.
Because no, even the basic math. So if you are getting a, let's say, a 400, Glenn, you're gonna have to help me here. 400, if you get $400 reimbursed by Tabor this year,
Mhm.
and we're asking for like 0.033% of that. That is not $200. We're talking.
No,
It's not.
It's not 0.033 of the Tabor refund.
Whoa, yeah.
It's 0.33 of the state income tax, is my understanding.
Okay, I guess I'll have to just
Yeah.
find out.
And I could be wrong about that.
Well, and I could be wrong too, but
Either
It's-
way,
they're
you're taking
holding-
money from each other.
Yeah,
it's
It
not
could be-
gonna come back to us as 200, it's not.
If I'm
no,
gonna
maybe
fight
it's
you on
$50, Sal, that's all it is, maybe it's $50, but still, it is what, for some people, $50 is nothing, other people, $50 is a
And
lot.
if I'm gonna come against you, I'm gonna look at the taxing you with this, and now they wanna tax with that. And so, I don't think it's a good idea to get involved in that. Let it happen, but don't pick a side.
Okay,
Don't
so
make enemies.
what I gather from this, Julie, at this point, there is not enough support for that resolution, okay? You know.
Not today, I
Not-
haven't
yeah.
researched it enough.
Yeah, so we'll leave it at that, okay?
And I will try to get the calculation from that.
Okay.
So just so you guys know.
Okay. It's still a long way away. First, they have to gather the signatures, petitions, put that back on. And maybe in August, we can consider this at that point in time, if it is going to come in a ballot. And by the time board members would have done the research. So.
If
we done?
anybody wants to sign the initiative, I am carrying petitions, so I'll just put that out there,
Okay.
Thank you.
because I believe in it.
At 9 o'clock, so we can sleep.
Okay, with that, we adjourn at 7:55 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll see you guys at 1:30 here on Friday.
Tell my wife, home dinner.